Right. Okay. Good evening. It's been a little while since we've done one of these. Quite a bit to talk about. Quite a bit to talk about. Um, we're going to start with the Premier League. Obviously, the last time I think we did one of these, Scotty Parker had just been sacked by Bournemouth. And we were just obviously discussing who will be the next manager on the chopping block. I think it's Brendan Rodgers at Leicester. I think very similar situation as at Bournemouth, openly criticising the ownership and the board. And they've just suffered a 5-2 defeat to Brighton. So that's going to be very, very interesting. Obviously, with the World Cup taking place, obviously when it is, it makes it hard for obviously managers to make changes to squads because the transfer window is now shut. And I think Leicester are in trouble. I think Brendan Rodgers is on the way out. I think Leicester are going to make a managerial change before the end of the season. We still don't know who Bournemouth are going to appoint as their permanent replacement for Scotty Parker and what's going to happen there either. Obviously, Serena Williams has most likely played her last US Open and is most likely going to retire. So we can discuss her impact upon women's tennis and tennis in general, and whether she's been a good champion, a bad champion, or whether you don't have to like her, but you can accept what she's done in the sport. Good evening, Dan. Yes. So obviously, I've been continuing with my football club history series. I've done some more clubs outside of the Premier League at the moment. Is this Man City team the most talented team of all time? Jury's out on that. I think that's a subjective question where no answer is right or wrong. Um, Club size, it's a difficult one because while they have won a lot of silverware, they still can't crack Europe, and the FA Cup is a competition they're not as successful in as people would expect. And I don't think they're on the same level as the class of '92 with Man United, so the '99 treble-winning Man United side in English football, and the Arsenal Invincibles. I just don't think they're on the same level yet. And some of this performances this season, some of the draws they've had, still highlight a lot of issues that I believe the Man City side have. I know Haaland has had a very, very good start to his time in England. Very, very good start. And I think Haaland's one of those players who will benefit by not going to the World Cup because Norway haven't qualified. But it'll be interesting to see how the World Cup impacts teams like Man City, who have got a lot of internationals in their squad who will be selected for teams, who will be coming back from that tournament battered, bruised, and fatigued. And until they can crack the Champions League and win the FA Cup more regularly, alongside the other silverware that they have won, that question's up for debate. You could argue the Barcelona side of the 2010s could be up there. The AC Milan sides of the 80s and 90s and 2000s with their consistency. The Liverpool sides of the 80s. So again, that is a very subjective question where there is no right or wrong answer, and people will be surprised by me saying that. I think, I think. Look, I've got to do the club history of Man City, and we can look at their period of success under the current ownership. We can look at that long 30. I think it was 38 years without silverware. And then we look at the history of Man City historically. And you said yourself you were surprised by how successful Everton were up until the 80s and 90s, and they were a very successful side themselves. And I'm going to go through and look at some of the club histories because it is quite stunning looking at the club history videos I've done this year. I have to just dig through my notebook. Please excuse me. They did need that centre forward, that striker, which they had gone without for several seasons. So Nottingham Forest, for example, they won a lot of trophies in a very short space of time, and they were very, very good in the '70s and the '80s. They were a very, very successful side. Port Vale obviously have never played the top flight, but as a lower league club, reasonably successful. Um, Sunderland back a successful side in the early years of the Football League, and then that obviously success obviously dries up, and they've had some very bad seasons in recent years. And let me do. I've done the history of the Football League video. I've got to do a history of the Football Alliance video and how important that is to the growth of the game and what then happens going forward. Um, Ipswich Town, they were a very good side for a brief spell, but they couldn't quite crack the dominance of others. Birmingham City, a team that hasn't had the success they should have. Very underperforming team. The lack of success, again, um, really stunned me with how little silverware Birmingham City have won. And then you look at teams throughout the ages. I mean, obviously, I've done some overseas teams as well outside of the UK. Bradford City winning the one trophy. That's a bit of a madness there. Swindon Town, they managed to win a trophy, but they have the worst ever top flight season with 5 wins and over 100 goals conceded. That doesn't get broken. Although Leicester might give it a good go this coming season with how things are going. But Swindon Town, very underrated side historically. You forget they were a Premier League side. Oxford United, obviously, were on the cusp of Europe, but because of the European ban, it obviously impacted them going forward. Um, Norwich City, again, another team with a real lack of success, and they came close to cracking the English top flight. They finished third in the first ever Premier League season, and they've only won 2 trophies. So there you go. There's another team that I think has underperformed massively. West Brom, very historical side, founder of the Football League. Have a lot of silverware in their trophy cabinet, and again, the 70s and the 80s, Liverpool were the dominant side, and therefore their success dries up. Newcastle United, obviously, again, a very, very successful side historically, and then the 50s stop, and again, the Busby Babes, Manchester United and Liverpool become the dominant sides, and so therefore their period of success ends. Chelsea. Chelsea's an interesting one, much like Manchester City, because they've had that impact of a very wealthy owner pumping money in. And now they have an American owner who is also owner of the LA Dodgers, or part owner of the LA Dodgers, and Todd Bowley, Major League Baseball. It's going to be very, very interesting what happens with Chelsea going forward. They did win trophies before Abramovich. That is what is interesting. Obviously, they won a lot under Abramovich. So, with clubs like Chelsea, with new ownership, much like Newcastle, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens going forward with them. Leeds United, their success very fleeting and very brief. Haven't won a trophy since 1992. So there's that. Aston Villa haven't won a trophy since 1996. One of the most successful clubs in the history of the English game, and without Aston Villa, we don't have the Football League, and they're the fifth all-time side in English football ranked trophies. So there you go. QPR, I've done a video on QPR. Queen's Park Rangers, they've just won the one trophy. There you go. The League Cup, and they were FA Cup finalists 1 year. So another side that hasn't had that kick on and won more silverware. Southampton won FA Cup, 3 runners-up medals in the FA Cup, and 2 League Cup runners-up medals. Again, another side that has really could have had more success and hasn't. Right, some other videos. Let's have a look at Grimsby Town. They have been in the top flight, never won a trophy. St Johnstone in Scotland, just a couple of Scottish cups and League Cups. They did a cup double in 2021. Never won the league. So Scotland's got the same problems as England, but Scotland's problems are because of that lack of depth and competitiveness. But they did that cup double, which was a fantastic achievement in 2020, 2021. Carlisle United, only one season in the top flight. Luton Town, just the League Cup in 87, 88. And they were a good side at one point. And again, just money problems caused their downfall, which is sad. Derby County, very four major trophies. They nearly went bust in the summer. Notts County, just an FA Cup. One of the oldest clubs in existence, older than the FA. What else have we got? West Ham United. They've got a very, very interesting history. Um, and they do have a European Cup Winners' Cup to their name. They've got a very, very interesting history. West Ham never won the league. So there you go. Sheffield Wednesday. They were actually a pretty decent side when I was a kid. Um, and they did win, and their last trophy came in my lifetime in '91. But they haven't had success since 1991. But they are a very, very historical and successful side. Former Football Alliance team. There you go. So that's a league we do have to look at. St Mirren. They've had a little bit of success. Only one trophy in my lifetime, but a smattering of trophies. They are overlooked, and that was a very popular club history video as well. Bayer Leverkusen. That was an interesting video to look at because they were called Bayer Leverkusen because they couldn't win anything. Their first major trophy actually was a European title. Then they got a domestic cup. They've never actually won the league domestically. Real Betis was another video that didn't do so well. Real Betis, they've won the Liga once and 3 Copa del Reys. So they, again, the lack of competitiveness in Spain is highlighting that video because they are a very historical club. Preston North End, the first team to achieve a league and cup double and the first team to win back-to-back titles. There you go. That's an interesting one. And then, of course, we've got the Women's Euros, which covered a lot of the summer. Then I did some NRL career videos. I've got to do some more videos on the NRL because the West Tigers have got their first ever wooden spoon, and that's really interesting. Wolves, I mean, they were the best side in the 50s by some margin. They were a fantastic team in the 50s. Dominant side. And they were actually a pretty good side in the 70s as well. They won a lot of trophies, and I think people forget how good they were historically. Walsall, they've never actually, obviously, got to the top flight. They got to a League Cup semi-final, and but they've never won a trophy in their history. Walsall, very interesting. Got a family from that part of the world. Bolton Wanderers, they've spent the record number of seasons in the top flight without winning the league title, so they never won the league title. However, they do have a lot of FA Cups to their name and a Charity Shield and a Football League trophy. Never won the league. There you go. And never won the League Cup either. Leicester City, currently bottom of the Premier League. They've won every domestic trophy you can think of for the top flight clubs. They've got a clean sweep of all the domestic trophies you can get. But it took them a long time to win the FA Cup and the league historically. But very historical club. And yeah, so it's going to be a tough season for them, I think. Huddersfield Town, the first club to win 3 league titles in a row, and Herbert Chapman, obviously, he would go on to being Arsenal's manager. Huddersfield Town, obviously a rugby league location with the Huddersfield Giants, and the foundation of rugby league took place actually in Huddersfield in 1895. Huddersfield Town don't come along until 1908. So there you go. That's an interesting one. And they've got some good success. All their success came in the 20s, and then it stops because Herbert Chapman, their manager, he goes to Arsenal. Portsmouth, they're really interesting. I think, yeah, good history with Portsmouth. Very interesting history with Portsmouth. World War II really hampers their success because I believe they would have had more success had it not been for World War II. Everton, as you say, you were surprised how good Everton were in the 80s. I'm not. Historically, yes, they were the second ever team to win the Football League after Preston had their back-to-back titles. They're an older club than Liverpool. They used to play at Anfield before they moved to Goodison. And yeah, since '95, no silverware, and that is just ridiculous how they haven't kicked on. Much like Liverpool, long trophy drought. Lack of success for a very, very long time. But they've had the second longest stint at the top flight. Only Arsenal have been in the top flight longer. Northampton Town, I was like, this was a viewer request, this one, really interested in Northampton Town and why they haven't had much success. They spent one season in the top flight and they had the shortest time taken from the 4th tier to the top tier, back to the 4th tiir with 9 seasons. Tranmere Rovers, Obviously, that League Cup run they had in 99 2000 was their high point, but they've got some great history of Tranmere Rovers, again, a club that gets overlooked because of Liverpool and Everton. Obviously, Liverpool did the video on that. That just was ridiculous. Just I couldn't do all the records. I just had to look at all the trophies, and that will be the same when it comes to Manchester United. Uh, quite honestly, um, the 19 league titles, 8 FA Cups, 9 League Cups, 16 Charity Shields, 6 European Cups or Champions Leagues, 3 Europa Leagues or UEFA Cups, which is an English record, 4 Super Cups, 1 FIFA Club World Cup. Yeah, they've got a lot of success. And then Aberdeen, in the 80s, they really gave it to Celtic and Rangers. They're the last club, other than Celtic to Rangers, to win the top flight in Scotland. Did a video on them. Stoke City, that's been a very popular video. Obviously, I got criticised for not talking about Sir Stanley Matthews and Gordon Banks. They didn't win any silverware for Stanley Matthews and Gordon Banks, so it's quite easy to not discuss their history because they didn't win anything with them. Um, but they've only won the League Cup and 2 league trophies and 1 FA Cup final. So that's how that's how easy it is to talk about that one. Obviously, you've got Dundee United. I did a video on, again, reasonably successful in the 80s. Inverness Cali Thistle, for their short history, surprisingly successful. Burnley, had to do a video on Burnley, and of course Sean Dyche is now getting mentioned in regards to Brendan Rodgers possibly getting the sack, and should Sean Dyche go to Leicester? I think it's a good fit, personally. I think he'll improve them. The Arsenal video was fun. Again, Herbert Chapman. Obviously, got to do a video on Herbert Chapman, his imprint on the English game, going from Huddersfield to Arsenal. The second club to do 3 titles in a row. And Burnley had a decent bit of success as well. And of course, we've done Millwall and Charlton as the last clubs. You were shocked. So I've just covered all the club histories I've done. I've got so many club histories to go through. There's so many clubs to look at. I want to do all the clubs that have won silverware, and then I'll look at the clubs that have come close and such. And then we'll look at some European clubs like Borussia Dortmund and Hamburg and Werder Bremen and Schalke in Germany, some of the Italian clubs, some of the other Spanish clubs like Athletic Bilbao and Valencia and Deportivo La Coruña and stuff. So that'd be interesting. Would you rather be a yo-yo club going back and forth almost every year, a club who spends half a decade in the top flight, like Wolves? Yo-yo clubs is frustrating for fans. Um, it really is. That's what's basically happened to Fulham. West Brom had that kind of name attached to them as a yo-yo club. Crystal Palace used to. They've now stabilised. It's frustrating for fans. You want to stabilise and be successful. And yeah, Sean Dyche to Leicester. Has Brendan Rodgers been sacked? I think Brendan Rodgers is done. I think he's cooked as Leicester manager. Very similar comments he made in his press conference following the defeat to the 1-0 defeat to Man United the other in midweek, criticising the direction that the club was taking, especially transfer policy. Only one signing in, multiple players out, and they haven't won a game yet to start the season. I think Brendan Rodgers, much like Scotty Parker, will be out of a job before too long. To openly criticise ownership, the board, the chairman, transfer policy, that is a quick way to get yourself sacked. As Scotty Parker found out last week, I think Brendan Rodgers will be the next one. But we're so early into the season, it's ridiculous. Man United have beaten Arsenal at Old Trafford, so Arsenal's unbeaten run ends. The referee's body has accepted VAR decisions have been wrong this weekend, so we'll discuss the VAR, although Brighton beat Leicester in a 7-goal game. I think that is Brendan Rodgers done, to be brutally honest, and he's now admitted that, Diego Costa has been handed a trial and train contract by Wolves because they have Kalajdzic is injured. Sheffield United are now top of the Championship. That's really interesting. Yeah, the VAR side of things, the amount of managers who are just blowing up about it. whether their teams have won, lost, or drawn is irrelevant. Even managers who are on the winning team are basically saying, like, VAR's got problems, and they've been saying that for quite some time. As I've always been very, very clear on this channel, the build up to the 2018 World Cup and then obviously the 2018 World Cup, I think was in a good place as a good starting point. It's been mismanaged over the last 4.5 years, quite catastrophically, in my opinion. And it is frustrating, obviously. Oh God, I dropped my pen. It has obviously been very, very frustrating for fans, players, coaches, the media. How not only can the Premier League get it wrong, but in general it be so badly managed is beyond me. There's obviously a lot of issues with VAR. My thoughts on it: it's been poor. It's been very, 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 very poor. But I've been very critical of flaws with the system for quite some time. The wording of some of the rules of the game, the laws of the game, the interpretation isn't great. That's a fair assessment. And yeah, but I do think that VAR has definitely not been implemented correctly. They've constantly tweaked it, and I'm also surprised how long it took football to implement technology into the game. We have to go back to 2014 with goal line tech for the World Cup in Brazil. So technology being used in the game of football is really late by comparison to other sports that have a lot less money. So sports like cricket, tennis, rugby league, rugby union, ice hockey, they are further ahead in implementing the use of technology. And on a global level, these sports have less money in them. And while they're all global sports that have international World Cups and World Championships and Olympic participation and all that, football being that far behind in the introduction and use of technology and the resistance to it is frustrating. Look, the David Moyes, Steven Gerrard, they've all been quite open and critical of VAR over the weekend. The automatic offside calls they're trialing. I mean, look, they can't even get offside right now, which is a concern, massive concern. There are definitely issues with the system in place. The next major sporting tournament I'm looking forward to is the Rugby League World Cup in just over a month's time. I think it's in 5.5 weeks' time. That kicks off on the 15th of October. That's the next major tournament I'm looking forward to. And of course, technology will be used at the Rugby League World Cup. And then we have a little break, and then it's the Football World Cup. The Women's Euros went rather well, I think. With the Women's Euros, that went rather well. I think they got the technology used right in the Women's Euros. Which was fantastic. I think they got most of the decisions right. And that was a fantastic tournament. There were people criticising that tournament. For me, that was a brilliant tournament. It was very well organised. There was not a single goalless game, and not a single penalty shootout in the knockout stage. There was not a single goalless game, not a single penalty shootout. And so I've got to look at goals per game average and see if that has radically changed. Because historically in the English top flight, goals per game averages vary between 2.1 and 2.9. But for the most part, it's around 2.5 to 2.6. It's stayed within that bracket. It hasn't really swung. When it has a dip, it's only for like one season. It's not for a prolonged period of time. So goals per game average in the club game, at least, to stay pretty regular within a time frame. Um, the women's rugby union World Cup. Well, England have now set the England women's side have now set a record of 24 unbeaten. Um, and look, we can argue about the strength of depth in the women's game. It is massively improving from where it was a decade ago in both rugby union and in football. There's still a long way to go, obviously. Um, but the women's national side have now proven on the international level in the women's game, both rugby union and in football, they're one of the world's best. So I think on that side of things, that's positive. I think when people try and compare and then you know discredit what the women have done and say, oh, it's not like the men's game. You've got to treat women's rugby union, women's rugby league, and women's football as separate sports. You have to treat them as completely brand new sports, basically, you're watching for the first time. But the growth we've seen in women's sport in I'm going to say the last decade and a half, has been fantastic. It's been a massive positive. You can see the positives, filtering through now. Better coaching, better fitness, professionalism, more money entering women's sport, better sponsorships, better infrastructure. So that's got to be a positive that we can take out of things. I have to admit. In regards to their qualification group, I mean, look, you've got to play what's in front of you. They might, I would say, um, I would say, they probably do it in squad rotation, give some of the younger squad players and rotation players a bit of a run out, get them some mileage and do a bit of squad rotation. In regards to Graham Potter and his links to the England job, I mean, look, they've extended Southgate, so if they were to sack Southgate, that costs them money. Plus, there's been no real mood at Brighton for him to want to leave and for him to want to move on, and that's a problem. That's a problem. I think Graham Potter's not. I would say he's unhappy. I don't think he wants to leave the club game. The international game is completely different to the club game, and many managers have found that out. Um, yeah, you could argue, oh, his salary, yeah. It's the buyout clauses. Brighton will be like, well, we're doing better under Graham Potter than we were under Chris Hughton. We're not relegation threatened anymore, and so therefore, why would they want to change direction when Brighton are on the up with Graham Potter? But then the argument could be had of Brian Clough was the best manager that England never had. England have been here before. The FA have been here before, where they have selected the wrong guy. Now we've tried the foreign experiment with Sven and Capello. Um, but I can't see Graham Potter going to England. I think, firstly, he's more suited to the club game. The international game is completely different, and what he's doing right now with Brighton is what he did in Sweden as well. Whether he wants the job or not, I think at Brighton there's less expectation, there's less media pressure, there's less scrutiny, and it seems to be a more relaxed atmosphere. He takes that England job, I think, yeah, he'll be under increased pressure and scrutiny that he hasn't been under before. But England have been here before, where Brian Clough and Don Revie, they went with the wrong guy. Look how that panned out. Clough had more success at club level, was never considered for international management. Um, and they're given Southgate that contract extension, so they've sort of tied their own hands, and I can't see Southgate wanting to quit. And whether Graham Potter will toe the FA line when it comes to certain things. I can't see Gareth Southgate resigning, to be honest. Um, and he's no good at club level. Just look at his record at Middlesbrough; shocking. But some managers are more suited to the international game than the club game, and vice versa. It's a completely different style of management that you've got to be, working with. I mean, Roberto Martinez has also been linked with the England job as well. Um, well, look, the Qatar on the sale of alcohol in fan areas, and it's Heineken or no, it's Budweiser, which is undrinkable. Which I don't. It's got to be beers brewed by Budweiser or the AB Brewing Group or whatever it is. So you can't drink a Carlsberg or a Carling or one of the European, like Czech beer or something. It has to be Budweiser, and it has to be the American Budweiser because they're a sponsor. Um, so that's probably not going to go down well with fans. But this is the predicament of going to a majority Muslim country where the laws are different and they're very strict, and but also the situation is with going to Qatar. Um, the timing of the World Cup, logistics, the infrastructure. I have grave concerns about the World Cup in general, like the quality of the games we're going to see, the quality of the tournament, ticket prices, stadiums, kick-off times. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Right, you basically just spammed everything in regards to Southgate. But yeah, the beer you won't be able to drink. You'll be able to drink 3 hours before and 1 hour after the match. There'll be no alcohol sold inside stadiums. You can only consume in designated fan areas, and it has to be a Budweiser brand. Um, so whether how fans are going to react to that, Americans will probably be happy. Canadians will probably be happy because they're quite used to Budweiser, but I'm not sure how that's going to go with the European and South American fans. Um, the In regards to Gareth Southgate, look, I'm critical of his style of play and whether he's getting the best out of the players. But the record speaks for itself in results and getting to a semi final and a final and then taking steps. Whether he is the right guy to win with the teams, you could say the same about Italy with Mancini. The difference between Mancini and Southgate is Mancini's had success at managerial level, Southgate hasn't. Oh, look, it's whatever happens with international management, doesn't matter if it's England or if it's Italy or Spain's quite toxic as well with international management, and the political infighting behind the scenes there. It's the same with South Africa with cricket and rugby union. It's quite toxic. Look at what's happening with the All Blacks right now, with the New Zealand media and fan base really getting after the All Blacks, even though they've won two out of their last three games. Their record recently has been absolutely disastrous. Graham Potter, I honestly think he'll probably stay at Brighton. I think um, he's got to say all those things in the media because they're positive things to say. But if he leaves Brighton, the pressure he'll be under will completely change. Completely change. It will become more of a negative than a positive. I honestly believe. Um, I think he's a good fit for Brighton, and Brighton's a good fit for him. I don't think he's actually a good fit for England, and vice versa. He may have the right tactics and the right style of play, but I reckon that the England job is one of the most toxic jobs you can take. It's it's not a good career move in my opinion, unless you want to have your career and your managerial expertise completely. International football is management is not a. It's a very lonely place. Just management in general is a very very lonely place. Um, um, management in general, just coaching in general, you're hired to get fired. That's the modern saying. You're now hired in management to get fired in sports management. Um, it's very rare that you see a coach stick around for any length of period of time. I mean, Klopp and Guardiola are exceptions to the rule. Obviously, Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, when he was there, was an exception to the rule. But I don't think we see a manager like a Ferguson or a Wenger who's there for 2, 3 decades in a job. I just don't think that happens anymore. I think those days are long past where a manager will stay in a job for a lengthy period of time. It's the same in any sport. It's the same in this is why I'm surprised Eddie Jones is uh, under pressure of the England job. I'm not sold on England going into next year's Rugby World Cup in France. I'm not. I'm not sold on a lot of things. I think a lot of the reason why Southgate is under getting it on social media is how the Euros final ended and the Nations League games following, which were not great. Um, but I've always criticised the format of the Nations League, and I think there's better ways to format the international calendar in between major tournaments. And again, yeah, the FA can pay him 5 million a year. Southgate's got a good agent, then the FA were happy enough to pay it. If the FA were not happy to pay him that, he wouldn't have got a contract extension. So the FA and Southgate's agent obviously had those discussions. And yeah, Potter's maybe on 2 million a year at Brighton, um, and that's fair enough. Um, but he would expect a raise to be on the England job as well. So it's more fool the FA for willing to pay Southgate that amount of money. Southgate's obviously got a very, very good agent. And of course, you've got success bonuses in there by reaching knockout stages, the latter stages, reaching semi-finals and finals, and they've got to pay those bonuses out. So you're not even taking into consideration uh, bonus payments. Um, and also, when you sign a new contract, you get the signing bonus as well. The fact that they've extended Southgate's contract makes it a little bit more tricky. Yes, the fan base may be clamouring in the fact that we want Southgate gone and Potter in. I'm not necessarily sold on Potter being a good fit for international football. I think with Brighton, it's a perfect fit. Club football, I think. Well, look, football fans are fickle. Look, the FA tried to sell Wembley not that long ago. They tried to sell Wembley 4 years ago. Let that sink in. They didn't do that, did they? Um, the FA has mismanaged a lot of things. Um, a lot of things. The FA is mismanaged. The EFL and the Premier League have mismanaged a lot of stuff as well. But look, if this was Norway, though, this is quite interesting. This is what's quite funny. In Norway, everyone has to publicly disclose their salary, be it in the public sector or private sector. But no, the FA has also gone down a line, and I think unfortunately, Southgate's got caught up in this with the allowing the politics into the sport, which fans are divided on. And this is where I say social media is the sewage of society. The FA have embarrassed themselves by allowing politics to get into the sport and hijack it in recent years. I also think what doesn't help Southgate is some of his selections. Yeah, well, that's in the women's game, and I say you shouldn't compare it. Now, obviously, yeah, they just went to a major international rival, and when she was off contract, went, "We'll have you." The Dutch, for whatever reason, didn't want to keep her on long term. She was available, and the FA, the women's department of the FA, swooped in and realised we're hosting the tournament. This coach has never lost a game in the tournament. But caving into fan pressure doesn't always work. It really doesn't. And you know, how do I put this? Fans wanted Solskjaer sacked at Man United. They got worse. Now, whether Eric Ten Hag is the right guy to take Man United forward, I mean, he lost the first 2 games badly. He's uh, you know, okay, we get it. You don't like Gareth Southgate. All you seem to bang on about in this stream is Gareth Southgate, how he's got to go and how Graham Potter's got it. Nothing's decided. We get it. You don't like Gareth Southgate. I'm not a fan of Gareth Southgate. I think tactically he's inept, and some of his selections are head scratches. But here's the thing: they extended his contract, and if you think Graham Potter's the guy, I think international football doesn't suit his style of management. But going into fan pressure doesn't necessarily get a better result. Now that's the king. But also, England weren't the only major nation to have a really poor Nations League. And Gareth Southgate keeps going back on his word constantly. But I don't. He's just an FA mouthpiece. He's a yes guy. I don't think Graham Potter comes across as a yes guy. Graham Potter is far too fiercely independent for his tactics, his transfers, and his style of play. But look, so yeah, you don't like Gareth Southgate. You get it. Oh yeah, there is going to be a lot of empty seats in the Qatar World Cup. Absolutely. The day that was announced that was going to be a host nation was for me the turning point in my relationship with the sport and my fandom of the sport and why I watch less of the sport now than what I did. It doesn't help that the TV rights for the Europa League and Champions League are all on BT Sport, which I think was a mistake as well. But my fandom has changed. My thoughts on the sport have changed, and since that awarding of the World Cup to Qatar, there's been the FIFA corruption scandal, Platini and Blatter, and then we've had the COVID pandemic, and that's exposed a lot of massive problems within the game. We've had the European Super League attempt, which again exposed massive problems within the game, and now you find out that Barcelona can't even register players. You know, things have gone horribly, horribly wrong over the last 30 years, and football governance has been weak in that time. So, you know, I've been doing my football club history series, and you know, it's very, very interesting looking at it. I've done Chelsea. Obviously, I've got to do Man United and Man City. They're going to be very, very interesting videos to research and look at their success. Obviously, I've done Liverpool. I've done Everton. Haven't done Spurs yet, but we've done Arsenal. Done Leicester. Done Blackburn. So I've done all the Premier League winners apart from Manchester United and Man City. We've done all the other Premier League winners. Eventually, when Spurs and Man City, and we've done the Big Six, which is just Spurs. You'll find how little Spurs have actually won historically. That's when a lot of casual fans be like, "What? Spurs have not won a lot of trophies," which is really interesting. So that's interesting. But yeah, the Qatar World Cup is going to be The Qatar World Cup was an end result of football not caring where the money came from for 30 years. For 30 years, football did not care who was financing the game, um, where the money came from. They weren't doing the checks and balances. They weren't. They were all after the corporate greed. The money was flowing. And in recent years, obviously, we've had the financial crash in America. We've now had the COVID pandemic. We've had, the Ebola virus, the Zika virus, as well, so other epidemics. We've got this COVID pandemic. We're post-COVID now, or the worst of it, and it's just been a shambles. In regards to Tuchel, look, Chelsea's form hasn't been great this season so far. Slow start. Tuchel is a manager under pressure. Generally, within 12 months of a takeover, the old manager's out the door and the new manager comes in. And it happened before with Abramovich, with Ranieri. He had a very good manager and a very good side, and Ranieri was gone within 12 months. Mourinho was in. So I can see Tuchel being gone at the end of the year at a minimum. Um, we'll see what happens. I can actually see a lot of managerial turnaround because of this. There's going to be a lot of managerial. I think there's going to be a lot of chaos this season. The fact that after 4 games we had our first managerial casualty tells you a lot. I think Brendan Rodgers is probably a dead man walking in regards to the Leicester job. Um, and for the first time ever, Leicester fans are going saying they want a manager sacked. Um, for some reason, Man United have touched Mother Earth after those 2 heavy defeats to start the season. Those 2 embarrassing defeats to start the season. And how long this good surge of optimism with Man United lasts, we'll see. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Yeah, look, people are boy. Look, Qatar's just going to. Look, obviously, I will watch as many games as I possibly can and do as many match reviews as I possibly can on the World Cup. Much like the Women's Euros, but I fear that this is going to be a very poor quality tournament. And what I've seen in the last 2 years is players are looking absolutely dead on their feet in games. The COVID pandemic has really condensed the last 2 seasons, and we've had a shortened summer for the players, a disrupted transfer window, a shortened summer, the season starting earlier. Oh, that's my phone going off. I can see players really struggling with this season and this World Cup. I can see a lot of players really struggling with it. I can see a lot of clubs having a lot of headaches in rotating players before the tournament and rotating players when players return from the tournament. I can see a lot of headaches there. I can see club teams being retested with their player depth. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, look, a lot of European and even South American fans are going to be put off going by the cost. Unless you've got money, cost. The World Cup in 4 years' time. Look, I think they did it in '94. There's a lot of indoor stadiums. So the US, I think US, Canada, and Mexico could possibly get away with it. And hey, it adds something to the mix, unless it's a thunderstorm or a tornado. But I think you look where the stadiums are placed. I did a video on that. Very, very interesting where the stadiums are placed. The 2002 South Korea Italy game. I mean, look, we were kids at the time. I mean, I was about to turn 13. I'm assuming you were a bit younger. So we were very young at the time, and of course naive, and therefore don't really know the machinations. But look, that's one of the most controversial matches at a World Cup, the 1982 World Cup, with West Germany and Austria playing out that game that eliminated Algeria in the group stage, and Spain '82 is another one. Argentina, Peru in '78. There's been a couple of games that there's been question marks over the legitimacy of the result and how the result came to be. Um, there have been some very questionable matches in World Cup history, and yes, Der Spiegel. I've watched several documentaries on sports corruption over many, many years, partly for the channel actually, and partly for my own interest, because I do take an interest in organised crime history and its relation to society in general. Also for the other channel, I did an organised crime video for the other channel. I did a gambling scandal video, the NHL Slapshot investigation. Check that out. It's on the NHL playlist, Operation Slapshot, and how organised crime was linked to a betting syndicate involving high-profile people in the NHL that it's very hard to find information on. I'm one of only 2 YouTubers to cover Operation Slapshot, which I find very, very interesting. I did a video on that, and that links into actually an organised crime video I did on the other channel as well, which is really interesting. You know, there have been some very interesting results at World Cups that are under investigation by authorities. And this includes Euros and World Cup matches and Champions League, Europa League, the old Cup Winners' Cup back in the day. Um, and yeah, there is a lot to look into that. And the Der Spiegel publication is very, very interesting in some of the allegations they raise and the amount of games that are under investigation for suspicious betting patterns and possible corruption or actual corruption. It's not just football, though. A couple of years ago, a Swedish ice hockey league game was cancelled because of suspicious betting patterns in the build-up to the game. Players were suspended. And that's a concern with some North American fans with the rise in sports betting and the the lifting of the ban on sports betting in the US. There's a couple of YouTubers I follow who discuss this. They have raised some concerns about, you know, the rise in sports gambling, the legalization of gambling, um, and that gets really interesting and is a discussion point. Sports gambling and corruption and a whole number of things. Is it the right decision? Is it the wrong decision? In 2002, looking back on it, that game is one of those games where it's a red flag. It's very, very obvious. But within 4 years, Italy, with a domestic league, obviously was involved in the Calciopoli scandal in 2005, 2006. So it swings both ways. You know, Italy were clearly robbed in that game, and they probably had the most stacked team that they ever had at that point. Um, and then within 4 years, their own domestic league is beset by a major corruption scandal that's still impacting Italian football today. Yeah, some nations that, Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic, and Slovak Republic, have obviously competed at World Cups. Yugoslavia, yes, have competed at World Cups and Euros. Um, Qatar paid money to Jamaica and Ghana and Austria to hold a friendly tournament in Austria a couple of weeks ago. Well, look, that in itself is interesting, but the Qataris, obviously, because they haven't had to qualify for a World Cup, they want to get some game time for their international team. Obviously, with no Confederations Cup at the moment, I don't know if they're going to do that ever again. You lose that international tournament where you can get some tournament experience and stuff. I used to love the Confederations Cup. That was a fantastic tournament. Obviously, they haven't hosted it for a little while now, which is frustrating because that was a fantastic tournament. But there you go. Yeah, I know it's been scrapped. It shouldn't have been. It shouldn't have been. I think that was a brilliant international tournament that took place the year before a World Cup, and the best teams from each confederation, best nations, gave it a go. Plus the hosts of that upcoming World Cup. Fantastic little warm up tournament for a World Cup, and yeah, FIFA got rid of it, I believe, which is a crying arse shame because it gave you some tournament football in a year when there wasn't any. And you get to see some players have, some tournament experience. Some nations have some tournament experience. FIFA Club World Cup? No, I'm not a fan of it. I know some of the clubs that I will be doing, and I have done club history videos on, have won it, like Liverpool, like Chelsea, and I Man United have won it. I think AC Milan have won it, Barcelona, Real Madrid. Clubs in Europe have won it. Clubs in South America have won it. I'm not a fan of the FIFA Club World Cup. Not really. No. If I'm being honest, I'm not a fan of it. Um, it's just more unnecessary matches to be played in an already congested calendar. Um, and it's what I call an unnecessary money grab by FIFA. It doesn't benefit the wider game. It benefits a handful of clubs financially. It benefits FIFA. Doesn't benefit the wider game. It's a corporate tournament. You're tempted to watch the England games at this World Cup and just watch the Women's World Cup in Australia. I think the Women's World Cup next year in Australia and New Zealand will be quite good fun. I really do. Um, I think it's unfair that Australia and New Zealand haven't hosted a men's tournament. I think that the climatic conditions are so variable in Australia. Like, I'm a massive fan of the NRL and the AFL. The climatic conditions are so variable between Townsville in northern Queensland all the way down to Melbourne on the Australian south coast that it really will test players from one game to the next. You could be playing in 30-degree heat, 8% humidity in Townsville, and be playing in 5, 6 degrees in Canberra at altitude, where it can snow when the game before, maybe 5, 6 days before, you're playing in tropical paradise. Australia is a continent-sized nation with climatic differences, which is a fun test to look at. Um, and the Rugby Union World Cup 2003, the Rugby League World Cup 2017 really did show those climatic differences between the various parts of Australia, which was very, very fantastic. Um, so there you go. Al Ali, in Egypt, yeah, they're a massive club. The AFC Champions League, most nations don't even enter it. Look, corruption in African football is endemic, and I did see some of the penalty misses in it's been all over social media. Some of the dodgy penalty shootouts that they've had. I've seen them. They are painful. Um, yeah, the FIFA Club World Cup, but it's normally contested by South American and European clubs when it gets to the latter stages anyway, which is pointless because that's where the best club teams are and the best players play. But no, it is a money grab by FIFA. It's just like the North American major leagues taking games to Europe. The NRL from next year are going to be taking games to the US. It looks highly likely. They've just got to find a replacement for the South Sydney Rabbitohs to play the St George Illawarra Dragons on opening night. Um, Personally, I think Cronulla Sharks, Penrith Panthers. I think it all depends on who is the grand final. I think just replay the grand final. That'd be interesting. Um, but it's a money grab. It's basically what the NFL have been doing with the London series for the best part of a decade. It's a money grab, and it has been for a long time. It doesn't benefit the wider game. It doesn't benefit the lower levels of the sport. It doesn't benefit a lot of things. It's highly disruptive to club seasons. I remember one year Man United didn't enter the FA Cup because of it. I think it was in the 99-2000 season. Man United didn't enter the FA Cup, which they were defending champions of because of it. Look, the Champions League format changes are proposed. They haven't been set in stone yet, but no, they just look really clunky and unnecessary. And it's a mess, quite frankly. It's not great. I think again, UEFA have got their European club competition formats all wrong. They've been getting that wrong for a very, very long time. Again, over the last 30 years, they've rebranded, restructured, and dropped tournaments. Football is one of those sports outside of cup competitions and international tournaments. I've lost interest in football. Definitely lost interest in football. F1 dead. MotoGP interest in that's gone. A lot of that's to do with TV rights. Cricket. I have concerns about cricket, and I enjoy cricket a lot less than what I used to. So there is that. Well, I'll be watching the Women's Rugby World Cup before I watched a couple of NRL matches at 3 o'clock this morning. I watched the Women's NRL match this morning between the Newcastle Knights and the Parramatta Eels women's sides at 3 o'clock. So yes, if it's on a weekend, then yes. And I'm generally up at 4 in the morning for work anyway, so that time of morning doesn't bother me. That start time. Yeah, but where has F1 actually grown? Has it grown in Europe and South America, where it was already popular? Or has it grown in the US and some of the dodgy dictatorships in the Middle East? Because growth is subjective. If you're pissing off your traditional fan base, who are the hardcore fans, and you get your strategy wrong, then ironically you could actually damage yourself long term. Short term growth is fine; it's got to be sustainable, and I think the direction that Liberty Media is taking F1 isn't necessarily the right way um, to do things. Why only some sports, Olympic sports? This is quite interesting. So it's up to the IOC and various. So, for example, the Winter Olympics, the NHL allowing players to go, even though they didn't go because of COVID, but they were going to go to this year's Winter Olympics. It's to do with athlete and player insurance. So for so long, rugby union, rugby sevens wasn't a thing. It had been an Olympic event since the 20s, and that was to do with player insurance. The IRB, which became World Rugby, couldn't agree with the IOC who was going to pay the players. Because if it's your international team, it's your international union, which will have generally pays you. And there's a big variance between tier one nations and tier two nations and tier three nations when it comes to central contracts and payments. Um, so it's all down to governing bodies of the international sports on a professional or amateur level and the IOC. And certain sports or certain sports leagues, such as the NHL, for example, have a bad relationship with the IOC. And a lot of it's to do with player payments for the ice hockey players, athlete insurance, who's going to cop the bill if that athlete gets injured. Because they are obviously employed as a professional. It's the same with football. They have to be under 23s apart from three veteran marquee players. Again, it's cheaper to have under 23s players than senior professionals, so more senior professionals, because they're paid less. So they're compensated as such. Um, in regards to other sports, again, it's down to governing bodies, the relationship they have with the IOC, various things. Um, Cricket is now a Commonwealth game. Squash, Commonwealth, 15-man rugby. You couldn't do an Olympic tournament with 15-man teams. Look how long it takes to do the Six Nations and the Rugby Union World Cup because it's such a brutal sport, the turnaround required. That's why sevens is the rugby format of choice because you can do a rugby sevens tournament in 2 to 3 days. Same with rugby league. They had that nines experiment where they did the nines for a couple of seasons. Again, because it's shorter format, shorter match times. And so you couldn't do the full 15 aside rugby union or the full 13 aside rugby league because of the recovery period required, how brutal the sports are. That's why the ice hockey Olympic tournament starts before the Olympics official start date, and that's why it's the gold medal match right at the end for men's and women's. It's the last events at the Winter Olympics, and they start much like the Olympic football tournament start a few days before the official start date of Olympics. So they can get those tournaments done because you've only got a 2-week time frame in which to get all the events done. But yeah, again, baseball is only really a high level sport outside of the US and Canada. It's only really high level in the Philippines, Japan, Korea, and Australia, and parts of Latin America. It doesn't have a big enough global outreach to have enough quality players playing. Skateboarding is too niche for the IOC. It's too, I don't know what the right word would be for that. But a lot of skateboarders also do snowboarding, so they already have a pathway to the Olympics. Six Nations in football, obviously it wouldn't happen, but if we were to have it, it would be one of three nations: England, Italy, and France. Every year, and therefore it'd be it'd be more uncompetitive than it would be worth the hassle. It'd be very uncompetitive. Bearing in mind, we obviously had the home nations tournament in the 70s, and it didn't last very long. Um, But if we were to have a Six Nations in football, that'd be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Italy do quite well as well out of that. I'm not so sure France would actually dominate all the time, personally. So I think it's France is an interesting one. It really is. France, Italy, and England are very interesting football nations because I think France underperformed at last year's Euros. Italy failed to qualify for this coming World Cup, and England had a disastrous Nations League campaign. So make of that what you will. They're very unpredictable nations. France, how they won a World Cup 4 years ago is beyond me, and how they made the finals of the Euros, 2 years before that again is beyond me. The two islands again. We of course we're talking hypotheticals, but if we're talking actual what's going on right now in sports governance and sports finance, the Football Association of Ireland is in serious financial trouble. So they would happily sign up for anything that makes them money. They would happily sign up for anything that makes them money. And what hurt the FAI was having Dublin withdrawn as a nation for the Euros, as a stadium, as a location for the Euros last year. They were banking on filling out the Aviva, the rebuilt Lansdowne Road, and making a proportion of money out of that, which would help them financially, and that's hurt them as well. Um, oh god, a joint Nations League with South America. Could you make anything more off-putting? Just that in itself is a sign that there's a massive split between FIFA. The fact that CONMEBOL and UEFA are having a joint tournament is saying to me that there is a massive split between FIFA brewing, and they're prepping themselves for a potential schism is a good word. It's a good word. Schism is a good word between FIFA and UEFA and CONMEBOL, which I think FIFA would be best to fix. Nations League not solving it. There's better ways to do the international calendar, which I've discussed before. I'm not ad nauseum, and it gets kind of boring repeating the same arguments. I know there's obviously newer viewers who will be new to the channel who will have recently subscribed, who may not have watched some of the older live streams and may not have watched some of the content that we've done before, who recently subscribed, who might have a few questions of what I feel about the Nations League. But when it's the same viewers asking the same questions, you're going to get the same answer. If it's a new viewer, then yeah, I'm more than happy to say, look, this is my view on the Nations League, but I've made my point ad nauseum since the Nations League format was brought in following the 2018 World Cup. Again, it's a cash grab by UEFA. It doesn't actually solve the problems um, with the international calendar. And look what happened this past summer. This summer just gone, where players were openly criticising the Nations League format, and rightly so. And I think um, that makes it very interesting. And when I found the five subs, if you watch my Charlton Athletic video, they were the first Football League side to have a substitute appearance with a sub coming off the bench. And that was back in 1965. Um, Back then, that was a revolutionary idea, having a substitute in the mid 60s. Fast forward till now, obviously, um, the five subs. How has football changed that much in like 5 years where you need five subs, COVID notwithstanding? Like this time 3 years ago, 4 years ago, even not just after the World Cup, you know, we had what's changed between 2018 and 2022 that you need two extra substitutions? Like what has actually changed? You um, I don't understand. So not really. No, I'm not a bit of a head scratcher with that one. The pace of the game hasn't changed that much in 4 years. Um, I am noticing more injuries though. Of that, I am very, very aware. It seems more noticeable. There's more injuries, more players getting injured, having careers shortened by injury, seasons disrupted by injury. That's very noticeable. But has the pace of the game really changed, or is the actual build-up of fixtures now really becoming problematic? Um, you know, the five subs permanent. we'll see how that plays out and see if long term that's a permanent long term fixture or if it's again temporary. I think it's going to be a permanent change, not for the better. Wasn't there a Super Cup last year between the winners of UEFA and CONMEBOL, such as Italy and Argentina? Um, I can't remember if there was, but I can see there's a better working relationship now between European nations and the South American nations in the um, international game, and I can see that clear division between UEFA and CONMEBOL and FIFA growing, and the two most powerful nation blocks. FIFA needs to be very, very careful about how they deal with any potential power struggle within their organisation because the two biggest and most powerful nation blocks where all the World Cup winners come from, sort of setting up their own agreements with tournaments. FIFA could This could be a crossroads moment for the sport. Pep argued for five subs and claimed that he played the young academy players. Lies already unless they're winning. Look, I can't stand Pep. I'm not a fan of Pep. Checkbook manager. It was called La Fasimala or something. Um, uh, they might have decided to. Again, it's a money grab though. Like, what does that actually achieve apart from a few high-profile players getting a big match fee and some sponsors getting some airtime? I don't think that actually benefits the. I can't. It's hard to keep track of every single comment and every single discussion. I understand that these topics may have been covered before, but there's over 2,000, 2.5, I think is it 2,200 videos on the channel or something in like 5.5 years. It's very hard to remember and cover every single question and comment that's been left on a channel, um, and that's why I have moderators. Um, okay. I don't see how that again. That's just a cash grab, in my opinion. Um, it's unnecessary games that don't need to be played at a time where player welfare is clearly in the spotlight. Um, and we can go back to the Christian Eriksen incident last summer at the Euros, and a few other players obviously having severe health concerns like Aguero, obviously last year as well. Um, and it's an unnecessary cash grab, in my opinion. And this is where global sports are like, oh, we've lost so much money over the pandemic. The thing was, especially football, it's built upon bad debt, and um, and the COVID pandemic exposed the the bad financial practices and the corruption, which I honestly believe is taking place on a more rigorous scale than what we were led to believe after, like, the Italian match fixing scandal, the Turkish match fixing scandal, the German match. These, you know, the corruption within the game, I think, is far bigger than even the most cynical of fans, um, you know, would would um, would think. Because the Barcelona situation, you do not get the fact that they're still owing transfer payments 3 years after a transfer. They haven't paid a penny to Bordeaux. Tell you all you need to know about the financial situation of Barcelona. The COVID pandemic is the end, the final chapter. When they sold Neymar to PSG for the price of a country in the Pacific, and that's before bonuses, that should have been a red flag to people that Barcelona had money problems, massive money problems. Um, um, England versus Wales at the World Cup, who would it mean more to? Um, to win. I think Wales is under. Look, I think that's one of those unpredictable fixtures where the results are predictable. It's all about who's fit on the day, who turns up on the day, and who's the better man motivator as a manager. I don't think Southgate comes across as a good motivational. He's a nice guy, he's not a leader, in my opinion. Is Lewandowski now registered at Barcelona? Marcus Alonso hasn't been registered at Barcelona, and they have problems registering players. The Barcelona situation, I could, you know, the situation at Barcelona, the money problems at Barcelona, I think, go back a long, long time to when they were actually winning everything. And because they were winning everything and bringing a lot of income in, you see, what people forget is revenue and expenditure are two different things, and income and outgoings are different things. Profitability is something else. Barcelona's been run at a loss for a very, very long time, and they've been fiddling the books to cover up their losses for a long time. And then COVID hits. But the Neymar transfer and the fact they suddenly allowed sponsors on their jerseys, which they always stated they would never do, they would never have sponsors on their jerseys. That's turned out to be a lie. So that happened in the last 10 years. So the money issues of Barcelona go back at least a decade, if not more. And what we are now seeing is the culmination of blatant corruption and financial mismanagement at a club that should be making money hand over fist after tax and expenditure, and they're not. Um, the likes of rugby union thought professionalism because they felt money would win the sport. The amateur status and the amateur status in the late 80s, early 90s, clubs were basically breaking the amateur. They were finding ways around it, and they were losing players to rugby league. Rugby league was offering big contracts. By the time professionalism starts in '95, you've got the English Super League being set up, and you have the Super League wars in the NRL with what was the Australian Rugby League and the Super League in Australia. And big contracts were being doled out. Executives were looking at players and poaching players. And rugby union was very, very concerned that they were going to continue to lose talent from like Jonathan Davis. Now, I can't stand him as a commentator. I really can't. As a player, he was brilliant. As a commentator, he does. I'd rather have a brain tumor, and I mean that with no humour, because he really it makes you feel like he was one of those rebels, and he was destroyed in the media. And Welsh fans, if social media was around the 80s and 90s, he would have never been allowed back to be the fans would have protested outside the WRU's head office in Cardiff. But he was one of those rebels that went over to rugby league, and he had a very decent rugby league career. He was a dual code international, fantastic player. But the problem was that a Jonathan Davis type player was being lost to rugby league. Campese for Australia, rugby league, and there was some young and you look at it now, and guess what? Rugby union is losing players to rugby league, and you could feel an entire NRL side out of former rugby union talent in the NRL. So, for all the resistance to professionalism that rugby union has tried, I think the implementation of professionalism has been a mess. And we will see what happens. However, the international games become more interesting because of professionalism. So the quality level for the tier 3 and tier 2 nations has massively improved. And the tier 1 nations, the All Blacks are human. So let that sink in. Which makes it a more balanced, open international game. Do we need to question if the Bundesliga is a top league now? let me do some more club history videos. And I will do some more German videos because obviously being born in Germany and watching a lot of Bundesliga as a kid, um, and knowing a lot about the German club game. It's going to be very, very interesting when you look at the history of the game in Germany. In the 70s, it was Borussia Mönchengladbach, which was the best side in Germany. It wasn't Bayern Munich. Uh, Borussia Dortmund have won a Champions League. Schalke, Hamburg, Werder Bremen, Stuttgart, Wolfsburg. A lot of clubs have had success in Germany. Unfortunately, it has become the Bayern League, and there are concerns within the German game, within the German FA, where they might have to look at salary caps and stronger salary caps and spending caps in order to make the league more competitive. Now, Bayern will if Bayern believe in the health of the game, they refuse to join the European Super League, which is notable. But Bayern Munich, I think, is actually having a negative impact now on the German national side. Yes, so we'll see what happens. Historically, the Bundesliga is quite competitive. Unfortunately, when I get to Bayern Munich's video, you will see, yeah, how many more league titles over the second most successful side in Germany. It is generally terrifying. Um, but they weren't always the top side. It took a long time for Bayern Munich to become the top side. They've got some great structures. They are a very successful club. But we were having the same argument under Sir Alex Ferguson with Man United, that they were too dominant in the English game. The same argument was being had about Liverpool in the English game. Um, and I fear the same argument we have about Man City. We're having the same argument in France now with PSG. The argument's been had in Spain for too long that there's only a handful of clubs that now, right now, as things currently stand, can win La Liga. Um, and again, you can look at the UEFA. I think the UEFA coefficient is part of the problem. So that's thinking. Yes, my old man was a regimental sergeant major in the British Army, although he was a lance corporal when I was born. But when he left the forces, he was an RSM. Yes, I mean, look, the first two teams to do it were managed by the same man, Herbert Chapman. Huddersfield Town and Arsenal were the first two teams to win 3 league titles in a row. Um, I think Man City may struggle to win a third title in a row. I think there's now this start to this season, they've been a little bit slow out the blocks, and I think the World Cup is going to negatively impact Manchester City. I think it could benefit some of the clubs that have slightly fewer players going to the World Cup. So we might see a surprise winner. We might see another Leicester City type victory by a club. And I think Man City will be negatively impacted, I think, um, by the World Cup. Oh no, the English top flight is very, very hard to win and dominate. France historically used to be quite competitive. That's why PSG did not have as many league titles as you think. Um, but in recent times, they dominate. Pochettino, that'll be interesting. Um, there's only two available. There's only one available job right now, which is Bournemouth. But obviously, he's now coached at a high level. But there's only one vacancy right now. I can see Leicester, Villa, or Everton making a move this season before the international World Cup break, and I can see Chelsea making a move at the end of the season on Tuchel as a rough guess. So I can see a bit of managerial turnaround. But Bournemouth is the only club with a vacancy right now. They've won their first game post Scott Parker's sacking. And being an ex-manager of Southampton, I'm not sure how the Bournemouth fan base would react to having Koch. They might be happy to have him. Um, he would be a good fit for Villa, for Leicester, for Bournemouth. Um, Bournemouth obviously are looking. Villa and Leicester have had poor starts. Gerrard and Rodgers are both under pressure in regards to their performances. Lampard's still under pressure at Everton, regardless of the fact that they're not losing games, they're not winning games, but they're digging in and not struggling, but they're not getting blown out, but they're not winning. Um, yeah, no, look, as a Blackburn fan, we've been in the same situation not long after being the Premier League relegated in a similar time frame. Um, I think it's too early to tell, but they've had a shocking start to the season. And Brendan Rodgers, very similar to Scotty Parker, his comments very similar on transfer policy and direction. But I think he's taken that team as far as he can. A new voice is needed. Um, yes, look, he's won a Charity Shield and an FA Cup and taken to a European semi-final, but and European qualification cup is on the bounce. However, a fresh voice is needed, in my opinion. Um, I don't think it's all set in stone yet, but they definitely need to look at and assess the situation. But they've only made one signing this summer. A lot of players out, one player in. To me, that's not a good transfer window. They're doing what Tottenham did when they did the stadium rebuild, signing no new players. Um, and they're one of the top spenders in Europe over the last couple of years, ironically. They come in the top 10, so I'm very surprised with Leicester's lack of investment this summer. They've made a lot of money in selling players, but I am very surprised with um, that lack of they take the money. They've been very good at investing the money they've made off some of the players they've sold, but at the same time, yeah, transfer policy is a head scratcher. But then you look at Nottingham Forest, you've signed a whole squad of players. Nottingham Forest have completely overhauled their squad. Um, if I was a manager, would you rather manage a mid-table Premier League team or manage one of the old? I would like to do a growth project. Every time I used to play FIFA back in the day, and I would never choose Blackburn, the team I follow. There'd be two teams I would select. In the older FIFAs, when Accrington Stanley was still a non-league club, I would choose Tranmere, and in the later FIFAs, I would choose Accrington Stanley. I would take a club from League Two, League One, and take them to the Premier League and win trophies while at the Premier League level. I wouldn't choose it. I would rather choose a club lower down the football pyramid and build a philosophy and get promotions. And then the ultimate goal is to make the top flight. Um, that's what I would do. That's what I used to do in FIFA games 10, 12 years ago. I would take a club in the lower levels, like a Tranmere or an Accrington. They were the two sides that I would pick, or a Yeovil Town when they were in FIFA, and they were a football league club, and take them from League One, League Two, or the old Division One, Division Two kind of level to the Premier League, and then win trophies. So I wouldn't if I was an up and coming manager, I wouldn't go straight to top flight side, be it a successful team like or um, a solid side. I would start lower down the pyramid to learn um, bits and pieces. Um, if Southampton ever going to show ambition, um, well, they've signed Houston Hartle to a long-term contract a couple of years ago, which I felt was a good decision. I think this season, because they've got less players going to the World Cup, I think they could be dangerous in one of the cup. If they win one of they've got to a League Cup final under Houston Hartle. They just need to get that silverware when that FA Cup or League Cup comes. Get silverware, you attract players. Players will be attracted to success. So I think they've stuck with the manager. They have no reason to move on the manager. They've got new ownership now. We shall see with Southampton. They could be very dangerous in the cup competitions. Watch this space. Considering how much Forest have spent if they get relegated, yes, they will be massively in trouble. Massively in trouble. Same with Everton if they were to get relegated, for example. Man United, considering that they've now picked up a bit of form and woken up a little bit, um, there are some clubs that are really in a bad position financially if they were to go down. No club wants to get relegated, but some clubs are not structured off the field in the right way to have that blow cushioned, if that makes sense. Let that sink in. Like, so some clubs, like a Huddersfield Town, for example, the way they're structured, they could survive that relegation to the Championship and not tumble down the division. Sunderland, however, tumbled down the division. So it's Norwich. There's a reason why they're a yo-yo club. They're well run financially. Fulham, ironically, they have money. They just not got the right ownership to take the club to stability. Um, but yes, so some clubs do have the fan base to support the club in the lower levels with ticket receipts in more gate-driven leagues, like a Sunderland. Yes, but they weren't run well financially. They had some bad finances. Now, what is interesting is some clubs just are not structured off the field right. Oh, look, Villa have had more than one season in the second division before I was born, and obviously in more recent times. People couldn't imagine West Ham in the Premier League era getting relegated out of Newcastle. Um, and yeah, Everton and Arsenal have got the two longest stints in the top flight. Arsenal have been outside the top flight for a very, very long time. Everton have been outside the top flight, as I say, since the 50s. And if you look at my history videos, which I've just done, it's quite stunning, quite frankly. The last time Everton and Arsenal and Liverpool were outside the top flight, they're the top three when it comes to longevity in the top flight. So Arsenal have the longest run in the top flight. Everton are second. Liverpool are third when it comes to top flight seasons, and the length of time being in the top flight. Tottenham, ironically, are fourth. Let that sink in. Um, and consistently in the top flight, most consecutive seasons. And it's borne out with the silverware the clubs have historically. They're in the top 5 or 6 for silverware. So Arsenal, longest time in top flight, third most successful club. Everton, second longest in the top flight. They're the fifth or sixth. I think they're the sixth most successful club historically. Liverpool, third longest stint in the top flight, second most successful club for league titles. Although actual overall silverware, it's almost, I think it's about even. It might be one more trophy than Man United, but one less league title. It's basically even on that one. You see what I'm getting at here? Long spells in the top flight mean success. Now Spurs, very long spell in the top flight. And when I get to the Tottenham Hotspur video, you're going to be stunned by the actual lack of silverware. They've won trophies. They've won a lot of trophies. But in comparison to Arsenal, in comparison to Liverpool, Man United, even Man City, they're well below. Blackburn have more league titles than Spurs. FA Cups, however, is where Spurs win their league title, win their silverware historically. But on league titles, they're down at the bottom. What's the quietest big club? Man City. The empty Etihad is a known fact. They pump fake crowd noise into the stadium to make it seem like they actually have atmosphere. So it's Man City. It's curious to see how few English clubs have maintained a place in the top two divisions. There's only, I think, 48 or 52 clubs to ever been in the top two divisions ever. It's the same chunk of clubs that are regularly in the top two divisions historically. Shrewsbury used to be in a higher level, and Chelsea have had stints in the second division. Again, when I get to the Shrewsbury video, it's going to be interesting. If one of the big six clubs get relegated, well, that sends shockwaves around the world. Look, Atletico Madrid have been relegated out of La Liga. PSG have been relegated out of League in France. So look, all of the big six, all of them have been outside the top flight in their history. And unfortunately, a lot of football fans believe football started in 1992, and so all of the big six, none of them have been outside the Premier League in the Premier League era. I will say this though: Spurs haven't won the league since the '60s. Let that sink in. Man City didn't win a trophy for 30, was it 36 or 38 years between trophies for Man City before their recent run of form since 2011. Arsenal went a long time without league titles. Liverpool went 30 years without winning the league. Everton haven't won the league since the late 80s. Man United didn't win the league between the 60s and the 90s. So, and again, this little black book has all the club histories that I've done so far and all the club histories that I will do. No team is immune from relegation, and no team is too big to go down. Let that sink in. They were saying about Nottingham Forest in the 90s, too big to get relegated, got relegated. So let that sink in. In my lifetime, Man City have been in the old third division, now League One. In my lifetime. Let that sink in. So, and again, when I get through some more of the club histories, like your Man Cities, like your Man United, formerly called Newton Heath, of course, your Spurs, you're going to see long spells where they don't win anything. Long spells where they win nothing. Spurs think they're a big club historically. They may be in the top 5 or 6 recent times, but they've been terrible at points in their history. They've had some great players play for them. Can't win any silverware. Look, Arsenal came close in 2006. If Jens Lehmann doesn't get sent off and they finish the game with 11 men, who knows? That close under Arsene Wenger. But they have got European trophies, as I did in the Arsenal history video, yes. Which is very, very interesting. Yeah, Stockport and Bury, look what they are now. Bury are gone out of business and been reformed, and Stockport have just got back into the Football League, so let that sink in. Oh yeah, look, Everton are a top 6 side. Yes. Yeah. Look, Man United getting relegated in the '70s. We will cover that. Obviously, the Man United history video. They spent a long time struggling outside of the top flight, and a long time not winning anything until Relaxon wins the FA Cup, I believe, in '84. And then a couple of years later, he's sacked and Fergie's brought in. They don't win anything for a while, and then '92 comes along. Right, it goes. The league titles alone: Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City, Everton. Yeah. No, actually, it's Everton above Man City. I think you'll find. Swap Man City and Everton around for league titles. Man City are below Everton right now. Overall silverware, I think Everton is still above Man City as well. You want to swap them around. Tottenham since '08 have the same number of trophies as Birmingham and Swansea. No. Tottenham since 2008 have actually won less trophies than Birmingham and Swansea. They haven't won anything since the League Cup in 2008. Birmingham and Swansea have won trophies in that time. Tottenham haven't. Let that sink in. Yeah, Everton have more league titles than Man City, and actually have more trophies than Man. I'm well, maybe not trophies than Man. I think Man City might have more trophies. I know league titles. Everton have more, and Villa have more. Villa are the 5th most successful. No, Aston Villa are above Everton, and then it's Man City. Aston Villa are the fifth most successful side for trophies won and league titles. I think they're above Man City. They might be just below, but they've got more trophies than Man City. Just league titles alone. Um, oh look! Even Charlton Athletic have an FA Cup winners medal. I've just done that video, which is interesting. Um, yeah, Spurs have underachieved massively, and they've only won the league twice. Only won the league twice, which I find really interesting. I've still got loads more club histories to do. Um, Lots more club histories to do. It's very interesting. Some of where the silverware goes. When we get to like clubs like Bristol City, Bristol Rovers, Plymouth Argyle, Exeter City, obviously they don't have the trophy cabinets that some of the big clubs have. But it is very interesting. But Wigan Athletic have won more silverware in recent times than Spurs. I love how Burnley just openly stole Villa's colours because they were the best side at the time. Yes, that is true. Um, yes, the reason why Burnley play in their colours is because of Aston Villa. That is true. Yes, yes, they did decide to change their colours. Their original kit looks quite nice, though. The traditional kit looks actually quite nice. It's a shame they didn't keep that. But yes, it is quite funny that they went, Aston Villa, we'll have your style of shirt, please. Um, yeah, no, West Ham, another club that's chronically underachieved historically. They've got silverware, yes, never won the league. Never won the league, which I find stunning. Um, Man United, Tottenham, and Chelsea with the wrong owners. Look, we'll see what happens with Chelsea. They're having a very stuttering start to the season. Man United obviously lost the first two games. They've sort of woken up a little bit under Ten Hag. Is this just a false dawn, or is this actually good momentum that they've got going? Um, yeah, well, we'll see what happens with Spurs, Chelsea, and Manchester United. As I say, no club is too big to get relegated. And if one of those three went down, they've had it. They would have had it because they're all in breach of financial fair play in regards to their finances historically. And out of the European Super League, Chelsea that season before were the only club to post a profit. Um, so we shall see. We shall see. Um, Oh yes, Ads United, Guildford, and Rose West Stand. Yes, the West Stand of Gilbert and Rose estate agents. That is just whoever was in charge at Southend in their PR department has actually brought a lot of attention to Southend United on their social media, with the sponsors as well. Ironically, no news is bad news. Any news is good news. So for the club to get that much attention is actually um, really interesting. Blackpool are not the only club to play in Tangerine. Obviously, Dundee United as well play in really garish orange. Um, Palermo playing in pink is a weird one. That is a very interesting one. I have to figure out why. I think it's something to do with the town colours, I believe. Um, I will not be watching the Wrexham documentary. I Have Dignity. I don't watch any of those fly on the wall sports ones because I think it devalues sport. I did watch the Tales of Tiger Town, the NRL one on the West Tigers, and well, they've only won I think 5 games since that documentary completed, and they got the wooden spoon in the NRL, and they've sacked the coach. So let that sink in. Not a massive fan of those fly on the wall ones. I've watched a few of them when they're taking place in season, but I'm not a fan of them, and I won't be watching it. I know people who do enjoy that type of fly on the wall documentary about like those like, sort of behind the scenes. But I'm not a massive fan of them. I will admit I did watch the Tales of Tiger Town NRL one. I did watch a bit of the Gold Coast Titans, the build up to last season and what they were attempting to build. Um, with Justin Holbrook and how they put the team together, which is slightly different. But yeah, no, not overly a big fan of those fly on the wall style documentaries. Not my thing. Um, Imagine watching a championship game at Anfield of Old Trafford. Well, Everton at points last season, that was a possibility that they could be playing in the championship this year, and then that's um, I would think would be curtains for Everton financially. But look, no one thought Nottingham Forest would get relegated, and they ended up in League One at one point. So from the Premier League, so and Sheffield Wednesday haven't been back to the Premier League. Coventry City, some of these clubs that were like, hey, these are quite big clubs. They shouldn't haven't got back. Um, if Man City named a stand after former great Colin Bell, would it be called the Bell End? Ooh. If it was one of the main stands, the Colin Bell stand, you could get away with that. But if it was one of the end stands, that would be absolutely hilarious. I wouldn't be surprised if the owners did that. Um, it would still get more interest than most of their Premier League games, yes, yes, and most of their Champions League games, absolutely, it would. I think apart from Liverpool and Man United, anyone in the Premier League get relegated in my lifetime? No, I think even Liverpool and Man United can, and both have been chronically mismanaged at various points in their history. Liverpool have had some bad seasons. Man United have had some bad seasons historically. Both have been outside the top flight historically. No club is too big to get relegated. And that'd be hilarious if both Man United and Liverpool went down. That'd be absolutely hilarious. But yeah, Arsenal have been in the top flight for so long, it's become expected that they're going to be in the top half of the table. Um, they are institutions, but institutions can fail. Let that sink in. Liverpool, Man United, and Arsenal will never get relegated. No, they can. They can. Let's not pretend it won't happen. I bet Arsenal gets top four last year if they don't have the constant stress and pressure of all or nothing on their. Yeah, I think again that those final documentaries can have a negative impact um, on sports teams. I think the NHL one with Peter Laviolette at the Flyers and John Tortorella at the Rangers cost them their jobs at those organisations ultimately in the NHL. Um, I think that did impact Arsenal's season, and look, we'll see what happens. What colours did the old combined Everton Liverpool club? They were never a combined level. They were never. Everton came first. Liverpool came second. They were never a combined team. Never a combined team. Um, would they come straight back up? With the amount of debt, they would be forced to have a massive fire sale. Forest Green, good. Plastic. They're what Forest Green are a baby version of Man City. Well, Man City are a historical club with a lot of success historically, very well established. But Forest Green, the ultimate pub team. Liverpool, Man United, and Arsenal always find enough quality to stay around. Well, they always overpay for players now. Liverpool not so much, but Man United and Arsenal have massively paid overs for players to get them in. If those clubs do go down and stay there, oh yeah, absolutely. But Liverpool as a city is what the hell bug is that? Oh, that's a moth. Um, oh look, Man United and Man City, yeah, will definitely test the true loyalty of the fan base. And if those clubs were to go down, that would be serious. It would have ramifications, absolutely. Um, if Carlisle were to enter the Scottish League, I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually one of the better teams in the Scottish League, quite frankly. Um, it won't happen, of course. I'm not sure how the fans would feel about leaving the English Football League and going to the Scottish League system, hypothetically, of course. Um, um, no, Carlisle is one of those because Carlisle's got a rugby league fan base as well, and actually got a rugby league team. Carlisle is one of those where they're so geographically isolated that you do have to feel sorry for Carlisle fans because of where they are in the country. Um, and only having one season in the top flight. And the season they were in the top flight, Chelsea got relegated alongside them. Let that sink in. How would I react if both Liverpool and Man United went down? That would be. I think the internet would have a meltdown. I honestly believe the internet would have a meltdown. Mainstream media would have a meltdown. And but look, Hamburg, for example, in Germany, were never relegated. They were the longest serving club in the Bundesliga. They were a founder of the Bundesliga. They got relegated a couple of years ago. They haven't bounced back. So let that sink in. No, Plymouth. It's actually easier to get from Plymouth to Exeter than Carlisle to Fleetwood or Morecambe, for example. The infrastructure is a higher. It's just easier. Ironically, Plymouth to Exeter is actually quicker with the train and has more regular train services than Carlisle to Fleetwood or Morecambe, which is quite interesting. Air Queen in the South and Gretna, that'll be interesting. But would it be better financially? Because the TV deal's worth less. And they would have to enter at the bottom of the Scottish League system, so it would take them a while to get to the top flight. And Athletic, God, yes, we're talking about some really, really crap sides in Scotland where 5 blokes and a dog turn up as the home crowd. I do joke, obviously, there are fans, obviously, of these clubs, but the TV deal in Scotland, the lack of corporate money in Scotland outside of a couple of towns and cities, the small fan bases. I think it's better for Carlisle to stay in the English League system, if I'm being honest. And how do you sell those derbies to your fan base to pack out the stadium? How would that work? But no, if Man United and Liverpool were to go down, that would actually send massive shockwaves throughout the European leagues. And look at Hamburg in Germany, big club in Germany. Got relegated out of the Bundesliga, I think in 2018. Haven't been back, and they've won a Champions League as well. Outside the SPL, is the Scottish any better than the Welsh League? Probably not. Not really. No. Carlisle is too English to play in Scotland. It would be war every week. It would be carnage. The police. I don't think the police would be overly happy with the security and the policing. Should they expand the SPL? I think they should merge the Scottish Premiership, the Scottish Championship, and make a bigger league, like to replicate the English system, and then obviously merge the League One and League Two as well, make it more competitive. I think that would actually have a benefit to the Scottish league game, or switch to a summer league. I went on holiday to the Highlands, stayed at cottage at Fort Augustus. Oh yeah, the Caledonian Stadium. Yeah, you've got Ross County and Inverness Carry Thistle up in the arse end of Scotland. I've got to do a Ross County video to do the Inverness video. That's going to be very interesting doing the Ross County video because they joined the league at the same time. Look, Berwick. I mean, look, they're a town geographically in the middle of nowhere, right on a border, and they are the only English club to play in the Scottish League system. But yeah, I mean, they could ask to be readmitted to the English system, but Berwick Rangers, it seems to work for them. I remember listening to England lose to Iceland on holiday. I remember watching that game. Inverness County Thistle sounds like a club all about Christmas vibes. Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Well, it was 2 separate clubs that merged. It was Caledonian Football Club and Inverness Thistle Football Club merged together. And for the first 2 years, it was Caledonian Thistle. And then they put the Inverness back in the name. and they've only spent, I think, 5 seasons in their existence in the third and fourth tiers of the Scottish League system. They spent most of their existence in the second tier or the Premiership in Scotland, and they have, you know, finished third. And they've won silverware, and for a club that only merged together in 1994, they haven't done bad. Um, um, and the Thistle is obviously the, the national flower of Scotland. It's obviously a symbol of the Highlands. Inverness is a gateway to the Highlands of Scotland. And what is interesting is their local rivals, Ross County, were admitted to the league the same year they were. Um, yeah, we'll see what happens with Berwick Rangers and whether they're, you know, long term they do stay with the Scottish League system, or whether they at some point approach the FA and the non-league structures to go, hey, can we reapply to join the Northumberland County FA system to then go into the lower levels of the Isthmian League, for example, the Ryman League, or whatever, however they work out the regional non-league structure, um, and where they would be plonked into the non-league system. Um, yeah, Elgin City's another one, yes. And that's interesting. You've got Elgin, you've got Inverness and Ross County. They are very, very interesting that they do exist. Um, uh, who else is near the Morpeth? Oh, yeah, Morpeth. Alnwick, and they're up there. Hexham, the middle of nowhere on Hadrian's Wall. Then you've got Carlisle. Who else is near the border? What's the conversation about Maynard going down? No, nothing major, Jason. It's just we're asking hypotheticals because I've been doing a lot of obviously the club histories, and obviously Arsenal have got the longest spell on the top flight. Everton have got the second longest spell on the top flight. Um, Liverpool got the third longest spell on the top flight, and it's really interesting. Spurs have obviously got, you know, fourth longest spell on the top flight um, of consecutive seasons. Manchester United obviously were obviously in the second division points in the 70s and I think into the early 80s as well. Um, uh, yeah, it's a hypothetical. What would happen if Manchester United and Liverpool? I think Everton's the most likely to have a big club to end up in the second division. But we saw it with Aston Villa um, getting relegated out of the Premier League a few years back. Obviously, when Leeds went down to, you know, got relegated, they tumbled down the divisions. So big clubs have been relegated before. So and it didn't send us massive shock. I think it's the way the Premier League era and the way the the marketing of the game and the way that the game is sold now. And look, you know, Van Gaal was right when he was interviewed in the off season about Man United situation, the hunt for a new manager, and he basically said when Ten Hag was being linked with the job, it's a corporate club, not a footballing club. And look what's happening to Barcelona. They can't even register players. And this is where the financial oversight and the financial mismanagement, and I do think a fair bit of corruption has got into the game as well. And we are where we are. Look, I'm a Blackburn fan, Jason. You know that we were in the third tier as well. So, and at one point we were in the fourth tier. So I know all about that. And done the football history, Jason. You should watch the videos. Been doing them all summer. You're behind on the upkeep, on the uptake. Um, who's more likely to go down? Liverpool, Man United, Barcelona, Real Madrid, the various like La Liga and the various the Premier League and the Bundesliga, they'll be very concerned that it harms their image. But at the same time, these clubs have done more damage to their domestic games and the European game than growth. I think, ironically, Liverpool obviously getting the English ban from Europe for their fans' behaviour. Barcelona and Real Madrid, in fact, all those clubs apart from Bayern were also obviously involved in the European Super League. So yeah, these clubs are public enemy number one. Bayern Munich are just killing German football, and the other clubs are public enemy number one for their European Super League plans. Um, in my opinion, so a lot of fans dislike those clubs for a variety of reasons. Um, Blackburn as well won the Premier League and not been back up yet. It's been a very long decade, and we've had a bit of a up down start to the season. We won the first three games, and we've had a wobble. We're in the playoff places. We were basically very well last season. I think last season we overachieved in the first half and then came back to earth. I think right now we're about right. So I think we're in that correct position where we should be. We should obviously be a Premier League club, but we're not. So there we go. Newport could have been in England, but look at Shropshire. Political geography. I could do a video on Monmouthshire and Shropshire, or the county of Salop, as it has been known as well. Shrewsbury and Wrexham. When I do those videos, the rivalry of Wrexham and Shrewsbury, really interesting. Crewe Alexandra. When I do their video, again, it's going to be very very interesting. Um, Newport County, obviously, Swansea, Cardiff. Obviously, there's some videos we've got to do, and we will. How come most teams that dominate either wear red or blue? That is interesting. Although Borussia Dortmund have had their periods where they've been a dominant German side as well, they wear yellow, which is interesting. Red and blue are very, very common colours in professional sport. They're very, very common colours. They're also common on country flags as well, on national flags. They're very, very common. And it's not just football, it's a variety of sports. They're very, very common colours historically. Because blue and red are the easiest pigments to get hold of naturally as well. So historically, um, the pigments used for dyeing clothes, red and blue, were quite common historically to dye clothes and cloth. And back in the day, the jerseys were cotton. They were jumpers basically. They're not these skin tight man-made fibers. They were wool and cotton jumpers basically. Um, and when it rained, they got very heavy, very wet, they weren't comfortable to wear in the middle of winter. I can tell you that. Um, yeah, no. If you look at the history of, I could do on the other channel the history of Monmouthshire, the history of Shropshire, the importance of Newport or Shrewsbury and their various historic. Because I've been to Shrewsbury a lot as a kid. I've been to the West Country a lot and the Welsh, the border marches and stuff like that. There's been various changings of county lines and borders and all sorts politically. Carlisle's been occupied by the Scots Berwick's, obviously, discussing Berwick Rangers being in the Scottish League system. Hadrian's Wall used to be the border. There's a lot of bits and pieces which can change stuff. Is red and blue the best colours and most popular? It's quite literally just down to historically, when you're dyeing pigment, your traditional man-made dyes, red and blue. Blue's actually Egyptian blue is the oldest and most well known of the pigments that are man-made out of materials. Turquoise, ocean blue, turquoise green's quite an easy one to make as well. A lot of the colours that you see, they're primary or secondary, so they're easier to make when it comes to pigmentation and dyeing of cloth traditionally. There you go. Oh, the old sticker books and Premier League albums, and yeah, there's I've got my '96 Premier League album, um, uh, '96 uh, yearbook, the Premier League yearbook of 1996. I've also got my Match of the Day 2000 Premier League poster of the top 100 players. So yeah, collecting the Panini stickers, collecting the trading cards, collecting the posters. I used to do a lot of that as a kid. Obviously, not so much now. Um, but yeah, like when I get to I will be doing Coventry, the AFC Wimbledon and MK Dons. I might do a joint video on both those clubs, um, because the original Wimbledon moved to Milton Keynes, the new Wimbledon gets started up. So I might do a joint video on MK Dons and AFC Wimbledon, because that's going to be very, very interesting. But the Coventry one's going to be interesting, and I can discuss their recent stadium issues, their financial issues, the fact that they've been in the Premier League to League Two, nearly go out of business. Yeah, sure. Oldham, yeah, they were a Premier League club, Swindon Town. They had the worst Premier League defensive record, in fact, the worst record ever in the top flight. Over 100 goals conceded, 5 wins. They weren't as bad as Derby County, but they had the worst defence ever in the top flight of any top flight league. Swindon Town, 100 goals conceded in the season. Although they did play an extra 4 matches because there were 2 extra teams in the league, but 100 goals conceded is never going to happen ever again. Although maybe 1 or 2 teams like Bournemouth or Leicester could have a complete disaster of a season, but highly unlikely. The old Welsh Cup was much bigger. Lots of English clubs on the border played in it. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, the old well, look, the Welsh league system is an absolute disaster. Let's be brutally honest. There's a reason why Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, and Newport. I don't know if Merthyr Tydfil still play in the English league system, but there's a reason why the biggest Welsh clubs play in the English football league and non-league structure. Um, there is a reason for it. And when I get to the Cardiff and the Swansea and the Wrexham videos and Newport County videos, it's going to be very, very interesting why they chose and the reasons why they chose the English league system over the Welsh. And that's me being quite honest. When I do get to looking at the Welsh clubs and their histories, and they've got great histories, it's going to be very, very interesting the reasons why they decided to go with the English system rather than the Welsh system. And this is historical because these clubs have been part of the English system for 100 years, and why they decided to go that route rather than build the game domestically in Wales like the Scottish clubs did in Scotland. It's going to be very, very interesting. And the fact that, oh, this is interesting. Now, this came up in a comment section on one of the videos I did. Queen's Park, who play in Glasgow, only turned professional in 2019. They played in a couple of FA Cup finals in England. They're a Scottish club. Let that sink in. So, and they were one of the founders of the Scottish League system. And they're a Scottish club. They played in the English FA Cup. So the early days of the sport being organised into leagues and cup competitions, the Scottish League system, the English League system, development didn't exist. So that's interesting in itself. Bangor City and Rhyl should have stayed in the English pyramid. Could argue that, yes. Rhyl, I think, would have definitely benefited from staying in the English League system, and especially if they got to the Football League because of the proximity of Crewe, Chester, and Tranmere historically. Tranmere and Crewe obviously still being in the English Football League. Obviously, Chester have been dropped out of the non-league, but that would have made for some good revenues for Rhyl. Here we go. Look, the fact that clubs like Bangor have gone out of business completely, and the fact that professional sport in North Wales is diabolically bad. It is really bad. There is a lack of, apart from Wrexham, professional teams in North Wales. Even semi-pro amateur teams. There's the Deeside Dragons in ice hockey who play on the Welsh side of the river of the border in North Wales. Um, you can see England from their arena quite literally. But that's an ice hockey team that play in the lower in the amateur levels of the structures in England and Wales. North and Central Wales is well. Firstly, there isn't the population, but secondly, it is really bad the lack of professional sports teams that play there. Um, it's almost like a desert. And look, they tried rugby league in North Wales. They tried rugby union as a professional level in North and Central Wales. The less said about that, the better. They tried. The Welsh Rugby Union have tried setting up a team. It lasted a year. Rugby League have tried, and football. But other than Wrexham, in the English league system, and with Ryan Reynolds' money now, but they were obviously a very solid English Football League club for a very, very long time until they got relegated to the old conference, which is now the National League. Bangor have gone out of business and will are going to struggle to survive long term. So let that sink in. Being Welsh, I do wonder what it'd be like having a league with our best clubs. Yeah. Again, when I get to the history videos on Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, Newport, it's going to be very, very interesting. The reasons why they chose the English league structure. I could look at Mather Tippett if they are still a football English in the English league system, or if they vote to go back to the Welsh system. But I can look at that, and we could, you know, um, and then with the historical reasons why, it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, it's hampered the game domestic in Wales, but rugby union and then to a certain extent rugby league is the sport to go down and the path to go down. Um, but look, it's going to be very, very interesting when you do look at the reasons why Cardiff City and Swansea, Wrexham, and all that decided to take the direction they did. There you go. But no, for North and Central Wales is yeah, it's a very vacant area when it comes to professional sport. It's just nothing. Cardiff and Swansea will just be the Rangers and Celtic of Wales, so I doubt it. Wrexham, Newport County. I it may happen that the Welsh clubs decide to leave the English league system and strengthen the Welsh league system, but then there's so little money in the Welsh league system, they would have massive. It would cause them to well go bust unless a Ryan Reynolds type character buys into Newport, buys into to Swansea, buys into Cardiff and props them up. Cardiff and Swansea have had massive money problems historically. So have Wrexham, so have Newport County. They haven't always been in the position they are now. Um, so you know, it's a double edged sword. It is a hypothetical, but there's no money in it. There's no money. They're better off in the English system. Um, they are better off in the English system, but you know they enter the FA Cup rather than the Welsh Cup. You know, they enter. Well, obviously Wrexham can't, but the others enter the League Cup as well. Newport enter the league trophy. Um, what else do you want to really? I mean, again, there's a lot of hypotheticals. Would it? Yes, it would benefit the Welsh system absolutely. The fact they're banned from the Welsh Cup is ridiculous. But again, that it's professional sport in Wales is a mess. It is a mess, and I've discussed rugby union, rugby league on the channel to death. I have an ongoing battle with Welsh rugby union fans, which has been going for 4.5 years. Um, and I stand by my criticism of the Welsh rugby union. I stand by my criticism of the Welsh style of play. Um, and and the way that the Welsh FA, I think, have got things right with their footballing program. I do. I think it's now got regular qualification to tournaments, first World Cup since the 50s or the 60s. I think it's 58. They've been to a couple of Euros now. They're becoming relevant again. And it does help when you've got a Gareth Bale and an Aaron Ramsey as your top player. But they've had great players in the past, and they haven't qualified for tournaments. So there you go. Bits of Wales are too remote, yes. Central, north, and north, especially northwest Wales, are just you're in the middle of nowhere. You really are. What's the population of Wales compared to the UK? No, well, the UK is part of, obviously. Ireland is around 5 to 6 million for the Republic of Ireland. Wales is it about 2 million, something like that. 2.5 million people live in Wales. Obviously, you've got Cardiff, Swansea, and Newport as the big, like, Llanelli and that south strip of Wales, which is just where I think 80% of the population lives. Yeah, it's between one and a half. It depends on which studies and which surveys and which census you read. Um, yeah, the infrastructure in Wales is an absolute shambles. Transport infrastructure really is poor. I do agree with that. Um, Liverpool 1-0 to Kettering. Do you think that's a bad win if Liverpool only beat Kettering 1-0? They're probably putting out a lot of youth players and squad players for that one. Um, if Wales had 10 clubs as large as Cardiff, it could work. No motorway between north and south. Yep, the transport looks terrible. Um, generally the north and central and north Wales is just it's just they tried with rugby union, they've tried with rugby league to introduce professional sport to the north of Wales. Obviously, Wrexham was the home ground of the rugby league side. I forget where Welsh, the North Wales Crusaders played in that 2000-2003 season. They lasted a year; it just didn't work. I forget what town they played in. I know Wrexham was used for the rugby league side and still is, but it hasn't really worked at all. Um, but it's the actual sporting infrastructure is bad. The transport infrastructure is woefully inadequate. Um, and yeah, you can go miles without seeing anyone. It is. You think of it like the Lake District, the Peak District, the Highlands, um, Bodmin, Dartmoor. You can go for miles and see no one. Obviously, it is quite mountainous. I wouldn't say it's exactly the same as, let's say, the Rocky Mountains in the US and Canada, but you could argue parts of Appalachia in the eastern side of the US. Yeah, I've been down to I've been down to Dartmoor, and that's quite similar. Um, yeah, you are in the wilderness, and it's yeah. Anglesey is like an island version of Dartmoor and Exmoor. There is literally just you can go miles. You might see a flock of sheep and a farmer, and then again, it's nothing for 10, 20, 30, 40. 50 mile, going all these back roads, you might pass through a little village that has 20 houses, a little village shop and a pub and a church, and then you're off again. The place names are impronounceable. You can't even understand the accents if you're a non-local. It really is. You're in the middle of nowhere. Um, but yeah, no. I'll have to look at Wrexham. They are one of the oldest clubs. I think they are in the 1860s, early 1870s. I'm going to have to double check that. They are ancient. They're one of the oldest football clubs. I think 1862 is mid to late 1860s. I think. I wouldn't say they're the third. I think there's a couple that maybe a little. I think Nottingham Forest, Notts County, Sheffield United, Sheffield Wednesday may be older than Wrexham. But again, I have to look at the old club histories and start. I might have to do all the Welsh clubs tomorrow. That would be interesting. Doing the Welsh. I've got a week off work, so I've got to do some paperwork first thing in the morning. But I might do all Welsh clubs tomorrow. Um, that'd be interesting. Do the four Welsh clubs. Um, because that one with Cardiff, Swansea, Wrexham, and Newport. And I'm the Tidville. I could do a video with it. They're not on the same level as the other four. Could do that. Yes, yes. During the American Civil War, we had they weren't professional at that point. May I have just made that clear? Um, they weren't professional at that point. The Burnley video is where we find out about professionalism in 18. When was it? That Burnley turned professional in 1883, which put pressure on the FA and then obviously led to the formation of the Football League a few years later. But in 1864, none of them were professional. They were all amateur. And what we call professional now was different terminology back then. Back then, it meant these guys still had day jobs, working or middle class jobs, and they were just getting paid to play. So if they did get injured, they had a bit of compensation to cover that. But yes, we did have an organised structure of clubs, and the FA Cup was about to get organised. The rules were written down, clubs were being formed. Whereas in the US, you're busy shooting each other. Yeah, it's madness to think 160 years ago we had clubs being formed whilst America was in the midst of a civil war. It is bananas. Um, it is absolutely bananas. Yes. Try a club in North Wales called Druids FC. Yeah, again, um, they're amateur, but again, there's just no money in the game in parts of Wales. There's no money in any sport in North and Central Wales. It's ridiculous. Um, Denver is too small. Wrexham is the club for North Wales. There'll be no fans for Denver. True. If Chelsea fans get angry over beating West Ham 2-1 in the London derby, these fans need kicking out of football. These fans are more common for Chelsea. Um, Owen, yeah, Michael Owen's dad, yeah, was North Wales. Michael Owen obviously was born in Chester, but he could have actually represented Wales. For England's sake, he didn't. Gary Speed, Neville Southall, Ratcliffe, Ian Rush, met Ian Rush as well. Um, they did, yes, they did. North, but for some reason, but they were all lured into like the Crewe Alexandra system, the Shrewsbury system, the Chester system, Liverpool system, Everton, Tranmere. There were other clubs in England that were professional in the Football League at the time. They're coming through at a reasonably high level that had the money that the you know, and they were in the catchment areas of these clubs from Cheshire, Shropshire, and Merseyside for the youth development, and that's why they end up at these clubs. USC's Grant visited my local horse race track right after. I said, well, that's interesting. There you go. There you go. It's crazy that Ryan Reynolds is now a part owner of Wrexham. Yes, it is. Why he got involved, I'm not going to watch the documentary. It's interesting why he's purchased the club. Why Wrexham? His first game was against Maidenhead, by the way, and they lose. And as I say, look, a friend of mine used to run a pub right by Maidenhead's ground. That would be fantastic to meet Ryan Reynolds. And some of my friends were at that game. They took photos of him and they're sharing it all over social media. Why he chose Wrexham is beyond me. He could have chosen any club in the UK. He could have chosen a club in Scotland, Wales, England, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. He could have chosen to invest in any team. Why Wrexham? Why then? Or why now, basically, in the last 12 months? Why Wrexham? You know, it's it is interesting why he chose to get into um, sports ownership. He's not the first, and he will not be the last actor or musician to be involved in sports ownership, not by a long way. But why Wrexham? That's the interesting thing. Um, I imagine why he probably has. He probably made his money back like that with the image rights just for Deadpool alone. Every time there's a Deadpool advert or a because the whole Deadpool thing, he's now using that character on that TV advertising campaigns. So yeah, he's probably already made his money back in a day. Less than that. He only spent 2 million. Um, yeah, John Charles being voted, Juventus's all-time best player. He was playing in the mid-80s for Juventus. Um, there is pressure. Yeah, they finished second in the league last year. I think they're going to be the best side in the in the National League this season. I think they'll go up automatically. Um, yeah, look, Wrexham is a very unique place name. And absolutely, it is unique, but why Ryan Reynolds chose Wrexham Football Club and why is beyond me. Now you look at the amount, and obviously Ryan Reynolds is Canadian. Let's remember that, but obviously he's based in the US. But you're looking at the amount of American money within the English league system, um, and because his partner is American in the sense of his business partner is American, who's bought the club with him. So there is American money at Wrexham, Canadian and American money. But you look at the amount of American money that's in Swansea, American owned. Well, it means two out of the five Welsh clubs in the English structure are now got American money, Swansea and Wrexham. And that is what I find really interesting is, yeah, you've got two out of the five Welsh clubs in the English league system right now, although there might be more in the non-league. I don't know. And that is including Merthyr Tydfil as well in that. I've got American money in them. Now, Ryan Reynolds is Canadian, but his business partner, and I think he's a fellow actor, is American. But Swansea's got American money. Then you go and look in the English side of things, Burnley, Chelsea, uh, Liverpool, Manchester United. There's a fair bit of American money floating around. Aston Villa historically had American money as well. Um, I think there's another club with American money, and I'm trying to remember. Fulham, another one. There's a fair bit of American money in the English league system, predominantly in the Championship and the Premier League. Dundee United have got American money in Scotland, so Ryan Reynolds choosing a club to buy is not crazy. Um, Choosing to invest so low down the football pyramid is quite interesting. Very, very interesting that he's chosen Wrexham as not in. Wrexham, but a club so low down where it's going to take longer to get up to the higher reaches of the football league structure. Much longer. Swansea or Cardiff could be quicker. Um, an English club could be quicker. Um, so, and yes, they could. They could. They. I think where they want to aim is the football league, and then go from there. Get into the football league and start building. Um, Bearing in mind they've got to stay within financial fair play and UEFA bringing their new spending rules financially, so they can't just throw the cash around and without getting punished. They've got to make a profit. They've got to be sustainable. The National League is the new name for the conference. So yeah, they've got to make the football league first, and then it's got to be sustainable building from there. You look at clubs that have tried, Barnet, Torquay. They haven't. They've been it's that's the kind of level um, that they need to not. They need to get past that. They need to get past Barnet and a Torquay and be flirting with, and then dropping back down, and it's difficult. Yeah, yeah, I know Salford City, the class of '92, absolutely. I mean, Robbie Savage has bought Macclesfield and saved the club from going completely extinct when they were basically out of business. He's part of the class of '92. So the class of '92 own two different football clubs. Um, and yeah, it's. I think Salford have a little bit more of a chance of being more sustainable long term than Forest Green Rovers, because the people behind the club have actually, footballing people. I do think Salford, with Greater Manchester expanding, and the amount of money that's gone into Greater Manchester, and the fact that there is the FC United of Manchester and the anger at Manchester United over the Glazers, they can pick up fans. I think Salford can be more sustainable and more profitable than Forest Green Rovers, because Manchester United has this disjoint between the owners and the fan base. You've got the FC United of Manchester set up in protest. You've got Salford as an urban area, and a lot of Man United fans are from Salford, and they're very frustrated with the direction Man United's taking. They can pick up fans. Bury haven't got a club right. They can pick up fans. Um, I don't think Salford would be another Forest Green. I think they're much better run. I think they're more sustainable. Do you agree with Scouts, not English Liverpool fans? Look, I've been to Liverpool. Parts of some members of my family were my dad and my granddad were Liverpool fans on my dad's side. Um, it's a divisive topic, not for my family, but for some families. Um, a lot of my friends are Liverpool fans. In fact, a lot of my friends are Everton fans as well. I've got a lot of friends from the city of Liverpool. Um, it's a difficult topic. I don't think the fan base helps themselves. And I don't think the city has a good image right now with some of the crime that's happened and that unfortunate killing of that kid and the Reece Jones murder a few years before that and the Jamie Bolger killing. The city doesn't have a very good image right now, and there's a love-hate relationship with the rest of the UK. The fan bases of both Everton and Liverpool don't help themselves at times. Um, it's a divisive one. There you go. Yeah, Aldershot Town, they've been in and out of the Football League. They've had money problems multiple times in their history. Uh, um, well, if you're talking about Forest Green, are they sustainable? Look, Villarreal, their stadium where they play in is actually bigger than the town that they play in Spain, and they fill out that stadium every week. So it is doable if you build a philosophy and a style of play and you bit of success. However, with Forest Green, Gloucestershire is not football country, really. It's rugby union country. and let that sink in. That's going to be, and yeah, we'll see what happens with Forest Green. Um, but I think Salford can be sustainable. There is that anger between Man United fans and the ownership Glazers, um, and the Class of '92 have pulling power. Um, and it all, yeah. If you look, Forest Green Rovers, I've heard that the ground's a bit of a joke, a bit of a laughing joke amongst football fans. And look, we can definitely look at the history of Forest Green Rovers and go. They are the pub team. They're the pub team with money. And the more negative press that away end gets, and the more of a laughing stock they become, it puts pressure on the ownership. It puts pressure on you know the board and the owner to invest in the infrastructure. And can they be taken seriously? They're, I've got nothing against any club achieving what they want to achieve at all. And look at Spain with Villarreal. The town of Villarreal, the stadium capacity is bigger than the population of the town that the club plays. It is doable being in a small market location and being successful. It is doable. But when you are in a location, especially like in a very congested sports market like the UK is, and that's not the predominant sport in the area, where you're going to find that cricket and rugby union are more popular amongst locals for playing, participation, viewing, fandom. You're going to find it difficult to build a fan base. Yes, football refs have regularly got in the way of big plays and have to do the drop ball. Same with rugby union, rugby league, they do occasionally get in the way, and then it has to be a scrum or a drop ball or a restart of play. It does happen where the officials get in the way. It happens in ice hockey. It happens in cricket with the umpires getting in the way. It's happened in rugby union, rugby league, and football. Happens all the time. Happens more regularly than you think. The only way I can see them growing is if they get Man City money or getting a big name back in the class of '92. Yeah, and the owner's a bit of a controversial character as well. Which is not having a controversial owner is not necessarily a bad thing, because it gets a lot of attention for the media, um, on your team. Um, but I don't know. The 96-97 Liverpool Reebok, because I have the yellow. Is it the season after the yellow European kit? But the 96-97 Liverpool Reebok home is my favourite one. No, Dale Vince is not a nice human being, and he comes across as a bit of a knob, to be brutally honest. Um, but most club owners, I look at a lot of football club owners, and they don't come across as particularly nice individuals. And most billionaires and millionaires don't come across as particularly nice people. Oh no, to be a player, you have to go. Yeah, no, that's actually technically against employment law, and it could be technically against some players' religious practice. I think that's probably why the team is going to go. Yeah, Dale Vince is an absolute knob. Yeah, the biggest pub team that would actually be Forest Green Rovers. They are a pub team. I would rather see a team like Yeovil get back to the Football League, or Torquay, down in the West Country at least, and Hereford United. Obviously, they went tits up and had to reform, but Hereford getting back, um, back into the Football League system at some point. But yeah, no. In regards to Forest Green Rovers, when I did the club history, that's going to be kind of funny, because they've only been a Football League club for 2, 3 seasons now, 4 seasons, not very long. Yeah, in order to attract players, they've got to pay overs. They've got to pay overs on salaries. They've got to pay more than market value for salary, and they just do not have the attendances or the stadium size, and especially in the lower leagues, which are gate driven. Um, yeah, a Balti pie at Valley Parade. That look, hey, I've had a chicken korma pasty. I've actually found a place that does chicken korma and chicken tikka masala pasties, and they are absolutely the best. Um, absolutely the best. But no, Forest Green Rovers at some point they've either really got to get into the championship, and then they would have to invest in the stadium, or he has to sell. I saw a video of the tier list of the 92 clubs, and Forest Green, Salford, and Harrogate were in a tier called smaller than Barry Town. Um, would you say you regarded a small amount of love? Well, for the that's a difficult one because that is a difficult one. I wouldn't say so. No. Doing the club history videos is kind of fun because I like history anyway, and then when you look at sports history, that is really fantastic fun. And doing them has been quite a lot of fun if I'm honest, because I do think a lot of fan bases in this country. I don't know about what the US fans feel about looking at the European game, but I feel a lot of fan bases in the UK and in Europe for that matter get overlooked by the Champions League clubs getting all the attention. The Big Six here, the Big Six, top Big Six club. Um, and I look at some of the viewership figures on the analytics. And these history videos aren't overly popular, but they're fun for me to do, and I like doing them. And I've gained a few subscribers out of them. But the clubs that have done best are actually clubs in the lower leagues for viewership. Um, and I mean this. Uh, Millwall has got more. The Millwall video has got more viewers than Everton. The Stoke City video has got one of the highest view counts in recent days than Liverpool video, for example. The was it Grimsby Town? Yeah, the Grimsby Town video got a lot of views, and some of these lower league clubs have quite big fan bases, quite big fan bases. And in my opinion, I feel that the the press really overlooks a lot of these football clubs. The only reason why Derby was in the news was they were about to go bust. If Derby had just got relegated out of the Championship to League One, there wouldn't be much hoo ha about it. Um, because they haven't been successful for a very, very long time. But if Man United were to get relegated out of the Premiership, for example, the media would have a meltdown. Social media would go into meltdown, for example, because of the global brand that Manchester United is. And they're overrepresented. They get overrepresentation in the media, whereas clubs like Charlton and I've got to do Leighton Orient as well. That's going to be a fun video. Leighton Orient's going to be fun. Don't get the attention that I think they should do, and they've got big fan bases. They do. They do. Um, they get ignored quite regularly in the media, rightly or wrongly. It's up for debate, obviously. And the Grimsby Town fans are fantastic. I've come across a few Grimsby Towns down south, and it's just Oh, they wear that jersey with pride and a little bit of mental illness, I think. I think they're a little bit mad. But no, Grimsby Town, um, very interesting club. I've got to do a Lincoln City video as well because, again, the eastern side of the UK, especially like Norfolk, Suffolk, Lincolnshire, not a lot of football clubs. Um, Breakaway London League, we've discussed that before. How big would it be? I mean, look, when I've done all the professional London clubs that are currently in the Football League pyramid, and I will include Barnet in that because they are now in the non-league, but they've had a lengthy spells in the Football League because they are in Greater London or Barnet. I've got Fulham to do, I've got Leighton Orient to do, Crystal Palace. That's going to be really interesting. Um, but no, the Breakaway London League, there's enough professional clubs in the non-league and in the Football League pyramid in London to have your own league system. Let's say 2 leagues of 12 or maybe 3 leagues of 12. Um, 2 leagues of 16, something like that. You could have a little bit of a league structure, yes. There are enough clubs. And you look at what comes out of South London on a regular basis being churned out. And we can always argue the pros and cons of Gareth Southgate. We can argue, is he a good manager? Is he a bad manager? He's from South London. Ian Wright, he's from South London. So they're, contemporaries. They were playing at the same time in the 80s and the 90s. At the peak of their powers, they were playing against each other. Southgate would be defending, and obviously Ian Wright would be, attacking. And they were both part of the same Crystal Palace team. They were teammates. They're both from South London. I wouldn't say I'm the first person to do. There's fan channels on these clubs. I think I could find a Grimsby fan channel. I could find a Southampton fan. There are fan channels on these clubs. I wouldn't say I'm the first, um, but I'm one of the few who will be willing to do a video on Charlton Athletic or Leighton Orient, or QPR. I've done my video on QPR. Queens Park Rangers is their full name. QPR for short. So Dan, that video's up there. You were asking about it. It's on the channel. I wouldn't say I'm the only one or one of the first. Maybe to an American audience who's not aware of some of these clubs, I haven't even got into the main bulk of the lower leagues yet. There's 92 clubs in the Football League and then a whole host of non-league who've been Football League clubs for me to look at. We could be here all day. Yes, London, Lancashire, and Tyne and Wear. Yes, that is where the majority of internationals have come from. But then you've got players like Matt Le Tissier and Graham Lasso, who are, guess what, from the Channel Islands. You've got, there have been players from the West Country. There have been players from the Midlands. Jack Grealish, for example, Rummy lad, right? There have been players from Norfolk and stuff. But yeah, the majority, yes. When I come to MK Dons and AFC Wimbledon, I might do a joint video on them because AFC Wimbledon reformed. MK Dons is the old AFC Wimbledon. Scotland, there's loads of clubs in Scotland. I've got to do Dundee because I've done the Dundee United. I've got to do Motherwell, Hibs, Hearts, Queens Park. I think I've done Partick Thistle. I'm going to have to do a Partick Thistle one. Yeah, I've got to do a Partick Thistle one. That's the other club from Glasgow that's had a bit of success. Ross County. I've done St Johnston. Elgin City, yeah, I've got to do that. So yeah, there's a fair few Scottish clubs. Falkirk, Stirling, Livingston. There's a fair few Scottish clubs I've got to do videos on as well. Obviously the big four in Wales, and then of course all the European clubs to look at. If I got to do the full 92, God, that will be here all day. I mean, my uncle and my cousin support Yeovil Town, so I'll probably have to do a Yeovil Town video now. Cambridge United I've got to do because I've done the Oxford United and I've got family live in Cambridgeshire. Peterborough United's another one I've got to do. Sheffield United's a big club that I've missed out so far. Blackpool, Fleetwood Town, Morecambe, Barrow up in Cumbria. Hartlepool United's going to be an interesting one. Why are they called Monkey Hangers? That is a true nickname. They're called the Monkey Hangers. Hull City, Middlesbrough. Yeah, there's a lot of clubs I've got to look at. Well, there you go. Team GB are winless. Only team without a broadcaster or shirt sponsor. And again, that's down to the governing body in the UK with basketball. Sport England, Sport Wales, Sport Scotland, and investment. And that's pretty shoddy they haven't got a sponsor, a title sponsor. So not good. Not good at all. When it comes to other international events, teams, even British Ice Hockey's got sponsors. And this is where basketball is failing to grow in this country. Is they haven't got a TV deal or a broadcast deal, even an internet streaming service. They haven't got a title sponsor. And people wonder why basketball is not growing in this country while the NBA decided to take its European series to Paris. Haaland is a Leeds United fan, so bear that in mind, City fans. That is interesting. As I said, I've got to do the Man City and Man United videos. They're going to be interesting. And you'll see the length of time Man City do not have a trophy. The 80s, 90s, and 2000s, they don't have any trophies at all until the 2010s. Haaland, well, he was born here, I think you'll find, when his dad was playing for Man City. Or he was very, very young. He could have been. I think he could have played some of his youth football here. I think he could have been eligible under residency actually, and possibly some of his youth. Look, he selected to play for Norway. His dad's Norwegian, his mum's Norwegian as well. He selected to go with Norway. I have no issue with that. I think it will benefit him not playing at the World Cup. As a player, it might benefit Man City. It might not, because the rest of the team may be so bloody shattered and knackered with things with the World Cup. We'll see. How long he stays a Man City player for is another thing. And is he the right solution to the problems that they've had with since Aguero's left? And they've had other players like Adebayor, they've had Aguero, they've had Tevez. They've had a lot of players who can play that striker or front three, and they've changed the style to suit Guardiola, but they don't have a plan B. So if Haaland goes down injured, what then happens? Gio Reyna. Oh, yeah, because Pepe, right? Yeah, he was, yes. Um, I don't know if Manuel Almunia has got any kids, but the FA approached him about being eligible to play for England at one point, and if he's got kids, they could approach because he lived here for so long. They could approach his kids and say, "Look, do you want to play for England?" Um, Born in Leeds, so there you go. He was born. Yeah, he was born in. I know there's that famous photo of him wearing the Man City shirt with the Edios sponsorship on. Back in the day, the season that his dad got his knee done by Roy Keane, which was a dot. It just sums up that right how that rivalry gets overlooked between Man City and Man United. But he was born here, but he selected Norway. And if Ireland goes down, it isn't pretty much the same team that won the Premier last year. Yes and no, but they put a lot of emphasis on getting into the club and structuring the attack play and the play around him playing as the number 9, number 10, number 9 striker, centre forward type of position. And that's their plan A. And what I've noticed with Guardiola is once he gets a plan A in place, he sticks with it. Doesn't have a plan B. Now, he might have a plan A1 and a plan A2, like an A1, A2, but we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. But if he does go down injured, that will be interesting how Man City respond because I don't think they've got anyone in their youth system or they're coming through their youth system who can play the same role Haaland does, and that is very, very interesting. And it's been they've waited too long to replace Aguero, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens with Man City. I think Haaland not going to the World Cup will benefit Haaland, but the rest of his teammates who will be eligible to go, how fatigued will they be? How disjointed will they be? Will they be seamless back into play? Um, because he's going to be doing nothing for 6 weeks. He might be training, but no games. Um, that's going to be interesting to see how the players adapt to that return to play. Very interesting. In my opinion, it's going to be interesting. And of course, you know, how many countries would need to pull out the World Cup and call it off? Look, we're too far down the line. The commercial agreements have been signed. FAs will get sued. There's contractual law now. Players want to play at the World Cup. However, whether they want to play at this World Cup is an interesting one. The players have not really said anything that is hinting that they may pull out. There's been a few FAs and managers, saying we're not happy with certain things, but we're not going to pull out. We're going to stop short. We're going to protest, but stop short. I don't know. I don't know. Chelsea, they play at, I think, Plough Lane now, AFC Wimbledon's ground, the women's team. Manchester United women's team play majority of their games at. It is the Lee Sports Village, I believe. Could be wrong on that one, but I believe. Reading women play at the Medeski, well, the Select Car Leasing Stadium. They share with Reading Football Club men's. Man City play on the Academy pitch. A lot of them play in the same stadium. It's only a couple that play in a different stadium, but for the most part, they play in the same stadium. Some clubs in various, so a club in the Premier League or Championship may share training facilities with a non-league or a lower league club to save cost for that lower league club. I know that's something that is done, and then obviously some clubs share the same stadium in sport. So you look at like AC Milan and Inter Milan sharing the San Siro. That won't be forever because the San Siro is going to be replaced soon. But they share stadiums like the Stadio Olimpico in Rome, Lazio and Roma sharing the same stadium. How much longer that continues is another thing entirely. But we've seen at times clubs share the same facilities. If Jack Harrison gets in the England squad, how much of a boost is it to the MLS? Well, look, at the end of the day, David Beckham was playing in the MLS for LA Galaxy and he's still got in the England team. Jermaine Defoe was playing for Toronto FC and was still around the England team. So, but they weren't products of the MLS. So it's a positive, I suppose. The MLS got heavily criticised in 2018 when the men's team failed to qualify for the World Cup in Russia. There was a lot of criticism thrown at the structures of the game in the US. But I think it would have a massive give the MLS a boost. I think the MLS is a very underrated league. I know the league structure is completely different with Eastern Conferences. It's based on the major league structure of the US and Canada with conferences and divisions, much like the NHL or the NFL. So it has a different league structure to what we as Europeans are used to, which is a concept that some of us struggle to get our head around. But all told, I think it's an underrated league. The games I've watched, I've been mildly entertained by. Mildly, I've been very entertained by it. It's a very open league. It's the play is more open. It's more refreshing. They're less. They're not as overcoached. They're the play seems to be more flexible. And oh God, look at my hairy legs. No, the league is more open. The style of play is the style of play that I'm looking at. It's not necessarily the quality. It's is it entertaining to watch? Yes. Is it? Are they as fit? Are they as well drilled? Are they as well coached? Not not on the same level. But you've got to remember the player base you're starting with, and the history, and then growing the player base, and it takes time to build a system up. And of course, the league is constantly expanding, so players are taking that step up. Um, but for the first decade of the MLS's existence, it was struggling. It wasn't making any money. Now it's making money. I don't know where it ranks in global leagues, but it's definitely, I think, a sleeping giant. It's a sleeper. It's a sleeper league, as I say. It's an underestimated, undervalued league by European fans who don't take it seriously, which I think is stupid. People were laughing at Wayne Rooney for going to manage at DC United. I think that's a very good move. There'd be less expectation, less media pressure. He has a good relationship with the owner and the team and the players playing there. He knows the city, and the media spotlight will be a lot less. Ironically, it will be big because it's Wayne Rooney. A global icon of the sport. But the media speculation, the media pressure, the intense scrutiny will be less. He can just focus on developing the skills as a coach, and he did very well at Derby County with no resources whatsoever. Um, so yeah, there is that. After what's been going on with Wasps and Coventry City Football Club, I'm not sure rugby teams sharing with football teams is a very good idea. When I did the Coventry City video, which I might do tomorrow as well, we can discuss the issues Coventry City have faced since leaving Highfield Road and what was the Rico, which is now the Coventry Building Society Stadium. The stadium issues that have caused Coventry no end of problems for 20 years. It's nearly bankrupted the club. They had to ground share with Northampton Town for a couple of seasons. They nearly went out of business. Wasps then relocated from London to Coventry, dropped the London from their name. They're now basically bankrupt themselves. They've got money problems. There's been the breakdown in trust between the two entities. The stadium was built for Coventry, but now it's being predominantly used by Wasps. It's a whole mess. Thing's a mess. The thing is a mess. Complete and utter shambles. It's a bad look for the city of Coventry. It's a bad look for Wasps. It's a bad look for Coventry City. And I'll touch on it briefly when I do the Coventry City history video this week. It's not a desirable situation for all parties. It's been a nothing short of scandalous, disastrous. And it's been nothing short of a disaster, in my opinion. Um, do you think USA should get out? Do you think USA can or should get out of the group, or can England and Wales do it? It's going to be interesting. Very unpredictable group. Even Iran could be very difficult because they're going to be very, very rigid, very, very structured. They're not going to be very, very expansive, and they're going to be a team that teams are going to have to break down. So it's going to be a very difficult group to predict. That's my opinion on that. Why do fans of the same club always go against each other? That's an interesting one. I know. Coventry, interesting history. Yeah, again, when I do the club history video, we'll break that down. I think they've had longer spells in the top flight as well. Also, Jimmy Hill, famous for being their manager, former Match of the Day presenter, ended up setting up
and being a driving force behind the PFA and arguing for the upper wage cap to be removed, which is why we've got the overblown salaries of today. Yeah, that's been done before with Harlequins and the London Broncos, with rugby league and rugby union clubs sharing the same facility. It sounds like a good idea in practice. In reality, or in on paper, in theory, in practice, it's difficult. I think Leeds, or what is now Yorkshire Carnegie, the former Leeds Rugby Union Club, which is now Yorkshire Carnegie, former Leeds Carnegie. I've done that with Leeds Rhino as well at Headingley. And obviously the London Broncos and the Harlequins did it at the Stoop in Twickenham, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, Wasps. The decision they've made to go to Coventry, I think, is now has cost them a lot of money, and the ongoing dispute between Coventry City and Wasps and the issues over the stadium are costing Wasps dear. Yeah, Jimmy Hill 3-point system are arguing for the removal of the upper wage cap. A lot of things, good and bad. The arguing for the removal of the upper wage cap at the time was a good thing. In the long run, with what's happened with wages, the system always needed constant supervision and reform, and I think they definitely got things wrong. No, Aberdeen had the first all-seater stadium at Pittodrie. There you go. Yeah, Sale and Salford City, and I think the Salford Red Devils rugby league club as well also has used the same facilities at some point. Um, Oh, the back pass, 1992, I believe, or 1990. It was in my lifetime. I was alive when it happened. It was in the early 90s. I think it was either 1990 or 1992. They stopped the back pass. They changed the back pass rule. Um, and that was designed to speed up the game. That was designed to speed up the game. That wasn't because it was a bad thing. And this is where like I find things interesting when we're looking at sports getting faster and faster. Rugby league, they brought in rules to speed up play. Ice hockey, they brought in rules to speed up play, and changes, tweaks the rules and how penalties are called and what is right. So back pass, change that, speed up play. The drop ball brought in and tweaked, speed up play. Ice hockey, they've changed rules and penalty calls and the trapezoid, so where the goalie can come out and control the behind the net. They've changed rules in ice hockey to speed up play. They've decided to have drives on cutting down on holds and slashing, and they've changed the way the game is called to speed up play. Rugby league has brought in the six again rule, and when the ball's kicked out, no scrums. It's just tap and go. The seven tackle sets when the ball goes kick dead in goal. Again, speed up play. Rugby union, yeah, rugby union. They haven't brought in rules to speed up play. I don't think. I think they try to take on like the 40-20 kind of the 22-40 kind of kick. Not keen on that. Um, I'm not keen on some of the rules that rugby unions brought in to try and copy rugby league. It hasn't sped up play, in my opinion. Cricket, yeah, slow over rate, yeah. They do get punished for that. They do get fines for that. Captains can get suspended for that for the following match. Yes, over rate. Um, it's rarely enforced though for the slow over rate. Um, but yeah, there are rules in cricket again designed to speed up play. What they've done in T20 and 1 and 50 over cricket is the power play overs, designed to get the run rate going really quickly, and either the batting side to start knocking the ball about, or the bowling side to be forced to take wickets. So there are rules designed to make the sport a bit more exciting. and increase excitement and speed of play. Um, but yeah, there are certain sports. Rugby union is one of them, which has problem with speed of play and speed of the game. Other major team sports have brought in rules to speed up play. Even the AFL has brought in rules to make the game quicker, which is not necessarily always a good thing, but it's good for the TV audience, not necessarily good for the quality of sport we see, and you get more injuries that way. But picking up the speed of play is something that a lot of team sports have been doing, and they're getting younger, faster, and bigger. So the average age of squads is coming down. The pace of the game is speeding up. Um, Longevity is not a thing. So contracts get bigger. The average age comes down. Careers get shorter. Contracts get bigger. There are some unintended consequences by rule changes to speed up play. Does Andy Murray have another Grand Slam in him? I don't think so. Maybe, maybe not. He might go to the Australian at a push. But Andy Murray's a wait and see. But he's near the end now. So is Roger Federer. I'm surprised Roger Federer is still going. I'm surprised he hasn't called it. Nadal, another one. Djokovic, obviously not defending, not playing in the US Open again. Could Djokovic, his career be coming to an end partly because his vaccine refusal and his views on vaccination? Because I doubt he'll be playing in the Australian Open at the beginning of the year, and I doubt he'll be playing in the US Open ever again because, again, they've not allowed him entry. So Djokovic may be forcing himself into retirement for personal reasons rather than he just deciding the time was right. He may have no choice if he can't compete in half the Grand Slams and half the tournaments in the world calendar. Yes and no. I think it's a very difficult topic. I don't have a clear viewpoint on it. I got vaccinated. I haven't had a flu jab since I was like 16, but I've been vaccinated for the last year for COVID, but I didn't get a booster done. Everyone I know who's got the booster has got ill. Yeah, Andy Murray's a few years older than me, not by much. Um, um, no, not by much, not by much. The Yeah, he's 34, 35. The thing is, the surgery he has had is basically one step short of full hip replacement. He's had a hip graft. I don't know. I think that's an accidental click on that. Don't ask. I think that's accidental. In regards to Andy Murray, his hip injury. Yeah, his hip surgery. There's a couple of rugby league and rugby union players and ice hockey players who've had a similar surgery, and their careers haven't been the same since either. Um, and they've had to take a long time out of the game. Trying to think, there's a lot of NHL players who've had a similar hip surgery. There's a couple of rugby league players in the last couple of years who've had the same hip surgery. A few rugby union players, um, and they play brutal contact sports, where fractures and dislocations and stress fractures and breaks and ligament damage and stuff. Andy Murray's hip surgery is an interesting one. What is going on? What is going on? Dan, what are you doing? Stop, stop it. Well, okay, now we're having issues with my moderators having a little bit of a absolute uh oh, what's going on here? Someone born in 1964, I say Murray was the best UK player in I think that's why is my internet going spanner? I think that's a fair. I think that's a fair. Yeah, Andy Murray. Yeah, yeah. I think that's fair. Um, I, I, I think obviously Hedman gave it a good crack when tennis was there was less money in tennis. I think. Um, do I think tennis will miss Serena Williams? I don't know. Why is my internet being so slow? I don't think. Um, I don't know. I'm not. I'm torn on Serena Williams. There is no doubt on her ability as a player, but there's been question marks over has she been doing it clean, and her reaction to basically being tested all the time didn't fill me with confidence that she was playing clean at times. Um, and Serena Williams is one of those high profile athletes that does divide opinion. And love her or hate her, you've got to look at her success. The women's side of tennis is less competitive than the men's side, or was historically. I do think the men's side of tennis. I think we are seeing a changing of the guard, so to speak. Your landscaping and your phone is moving. Yes, yes. I thought there was a little bit of a malfunction on your part. Um, yeah, there has been allegations levelled at Serena Williams and other tennis players of doping, and what we saw with Maria Sharapova. Unfortunately, it came out to be true that a high-profile player um, was doping and abusing the therapeutic use exemption. Serena didn't like the fact that she was being accused of doping, but she was winning all the time, so she's getting tested all the time. Don't worry, Tommy Tornado is free now. There was a bit of a cock up. I knew something was going on with one of my moderators. Um, so the Serena Williams way, the way she reacted to going, I've got nothing to hide. When she was, you kept hiding and unhiding and deleting his messages. the mouth. We've had a technical faux pas. It's fine. It's okay. We're moving on with our lives. You've apologised. You didn't realise there was a technical malfunction. It is okay. We can move on with our lives. Just put screen lock on if you're on your phone. Just put screen lock. Cannot do anything. Just. Oh look, we had a technical faux pas on Dan's part. He didn't realise he was actually yes, he's a moderator, but he didn't realise his phone was in his pocket. Please put screen lock on if you're going to do that. Or just have it in the background as your headphones in. Or stop landscaping. No, at the end of the day, the Serena Williams one, when a couple of years ago, she reacted very badly to the media going, "How you're getting tested a lot? Do you think it's fair?" She went, "It's unfair, but you're winning all the time, and you won a lot, and so people are going to ask questions about are you doing this clean?" And she has had her antics on the court, and she's thrown her tantrums, and that doesn't always sit well with me when they get petulant like that. And the same can be said of in cycling. Pro cycling's got a big image issue. We've seen a handful of players get done for recreationals, and a handful of players get done for performance enhancing. Um, yes, she is, but she may have a higher testosterone level naturally in her system. I have friends who've got hormone imbalances, both men and women who've got a slightly higher estrogen or testosterone level in their system or whatever it may be. There's medications for that, and it can lead to acne, it can lead to other health issues, difficulty in conceiving, various things. What is a problem, and I think Dan might be able to quote me on debate me on this, but in the American collegiate system, so the NCAA, so the track and field, the tennis, American football, whatever the sport might be, the American collegiate system, there is an issue with steroid use. There is an issue with recreational drug use. There is an issue with cheating, and that is a major widespread problem within the NCAA. It's not like a systemic, as in state sponsored, like we saw with the Russians and the Chinese and the East Germans back in the day with the state sponsored doping that we've seen, which has led to the IOC banning Russia from competition long before the invasion of Ukraine. But what we have seen throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s through the NCAA system and with Major League Baseball and the minor leagues players doping steroids to hit further, is the American system isn't state sponsored, but there's sort of this acceptance. It happens. Oh, we'll catch them, we'll ban them, but we'll let them back in a couple of years. We'll catch them again, we'll ban them, we'll let them back in a couple of years. And some of the athletes have been banned 3, 4, 5 times. And for me, that's frustrating as a sports fan, watching and I forget Tyson Gay. There's a sprinter who's been banned multiple times for doping offences. Multiple times. And that amphetamines is recreational. Recreational, which is different, but there is a performance enhancing side effect of using speed. And it's been done in cycling for a while, but it's now in the 2020s. This debate of whether an athlete who's caught and given a lengthy ban should be allowed back into the sport that they participate. Are the All Blacks in rugby union? They are. They might have won 2 out of the last 3, and they may have gone through that dark spell. But it's showing that the All Blacks are suffering record defeats, and they're losing more than they're winning in a calendar year. Which means the Rugby Championship, all 4 teams can win the Rugby Championship right now with 2 games remaining. All 4 of them can win. All of them can win. Which is ridiculous. Argentina, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand, all 4 of them can win right now. But the All Blacks are in trouble. And okay, Ireland, they don't have a good recent record against since 2016. They don't have a good recent record against Ireland. That's fair enough. They don't. It's fine. France, they have a love-hate relationship playing the French. But I think the moment where the All Blacks, and COVID notwithstanding, because COVID has had an impact over the last couple of years, but notwithstanding, the moment that the All Blacks, I think, needed to really assess them, the turning point was the 2019 World Cup semi-final. Because that was a very, very poor England side that made it to the final, 3 years ago. Very poor England side. In my opinion, how they got to that final, I don't know, but they did. And we can go yay or nay, but they made it to the final regardless. That, I think, is the moment. And that defeat, the scoreline as well, the defeat they suffered, and that's the turning point. I know Ireland had obviously beaten the All Blacks in 2016 and 2018. We know that. But that World Cup defeat, I think, for me, was the turning point. This is that's where the decline to where we are now with the All Blacks. I think that's the moment that things were starting to 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 go wrong a little bit. And when you have this culture of, you know, arrogant culture, whether it's deliberate or accidental, because they've been so on top of things for so long, it's almost there's an expectation to win rather than we've got to work hard to win. I think yeah, the All Blacks and the New Zealand Rugby Union, there are issues at play structurally. There's a issue. There's a lot. It's not as perfect a system as people expected. Really. There are money problems in the Southern Hemisphere. There are pathway issues. There's not enough money in the game. Yes, it's the national sport, but rugby league is also pretty popular. And look what happened with the women's Black Ferns. That review, that just disastrous. It's not just the men's team that's gone through a crisis. The women's team as well. So there's something very wrong within New Zealand, the rugby union. Very good. What's my hair doing? Look at that. That's my hair. That's my alfalfa. So there is definitely something going on within New Zealand Rugby Union structurally. And on the women's side of thing, the coach has resigned. There's been a review into 2 reviews now, actually, in his tenure, but he's gone into the culture and the structures and you know how complaints are dealt with, and you know cultural understanding with the Maori and Pacifica players and the white players, which you would never have thought with a New Zealand team that would be an issue, but it is. And they had a disastrous autumn. They lost all their test matches. I watched a lot of their test matches. They were absolutely dreadful, dreadful. And you can't blame COVID on that because they've got a fully professional coaching setup, a fully professional sevens program. Uh, these women were playing domestically within the New Zealand structure regularly with a regular domestic league. They were match fit. It wasn't as if just because they hadn't played international rugby didn't mean they hadn't been playing games and training. The coaches are fully professional. They did a culture review. Um, there was allegations of bullying and cultural insensitivities and a whole host of other issues. And then the men's team is having similar struggles. And the way that every time the coach is going to get sacked, and they say, they got to sack Foster. They win the next game, but then they lose. They are in trouble. Now, while they're in first place in the Rugby Championship, they are in trouble. A lot of trouble. Yes, other nations have improved, and I think COVID has an impact. The New Zealand, the All Blacks are in trouble. The Black Ferns are in trouble as well. New Zealand Rugby Union is I don't think really. I think the New Zealand Rugby Union, their board, their structures. I don't think they fully are aware of the fact that the game is actually at a crossroads, and there are things happening within this men's team, and there are things that have happened with the women's team that make me wonder if the union themselves are actually really taking control of the situation. And I think there's some things to come out about the culture within the All Blacks that is negative. And when we hear all these positive stories about the All Blacks in the past and what it meant to represent, the fans and the media have got into meltdown. Oh, look, they're human. The All Blacks have always been beatable. Every team is beatable. No team is fully invincible, but it's the manner of some of the defeats they're suffering and the amount of defeats in a calendar year that they are suffering is raising a lot of eyebrows and a lot of questions about a lot of things in regards to their structures, their systems, their program, their pathways, and the culture. Because the Black Ferns, which is the women's team, there was a culture review and it came back not positive. So there's definitely a lot of negativity around the setup, the questions about the setup, the union, the structures, the club game. Look, you could always like say, okay, there's money issues here. We need to look at using our money more effectively, or maybe merge a couple of clubs together. That's one thing. But then when you're talking about culture, structure within an organisation, accountability within an organisation, what came out about the Black Ferns and the culture within that squad and within New Zealand Rugby Union itself in regards to the women's game, I think applies to the men's game as well. I think there are massive problems that success of the All Blacks has had for so long have covered up. And yeah, just because they've been the most dominant side for 30 years, there are problems there that the success of the team has covered up. And I think things are going to come out about the culture behind closed doors within the union at a corporate level and an administrative level and within the team structure itself that are going to really stun some people. And I don't think enough attention was paid to the review into the women's game because I think that transcends the men's game as well. Because the coach of the former women's coach was there after the last review in 2017. Didn't lose his job over similar allegations of bullying, sexism, racism, cultural insensitivity, that kind of thing. Didn't lose his job then. Have a shocking autumn series where they're, well, I don't know how dreadful is the nicest way I can describe it, but absolutely diabolical October and November and December in the Northern Hemisphere. And the review didn't take place until a couple of months ago at the beginning of summer, which is their winter. So they've had all of January, February, March, that what would be their off season to have this review, and they do it mid-season. It's and I don't think enough attention's been paid to that. But no, yes, there is the aura around their invincibility is gone, shattered, gone. They can't use that when they're doing the hacker and they're trying to intimidate to play at teams before they've even played the mental game. They can't use that anymore because that strength is gone completely. And some of the defeats they've suffered, like the defeat to Argentina, one of the defeats to South. The defeat to Argentina, I think, massive, absolutely massive. Blows it out of the water completely, completely. But it was look at the Brazil side of the 60s and 70s. 66, their aura disappeared in the 1966 World Cup. They were beaten. The aura of the French team. They were great in World Cup 98 and Euro 2000, World Cup 2002. They couldn't get out of the group. So Brazil in 2014, they were misfiring in that tournament a little bit. They weren't quite as fluid as they have been in the past tournaments. That 7-1 shattered the image that we have of Brazilian football. And then you lose that psychological battle. The All Blacks, I think, is the last international or team in a team sport that has this aura of invincibility, and it's gone. It's shattered. They've lost that psychological edge that they would have had for 30 years. Who's the fans' favourite to win? Well, in my opinion, I think it's too open. Because of the time of year it's being played, it's thrown it all up in the air completely. I still think a South American or European team will win. I think Canada and the US could have, especially Canada, could have very good tournaments. I think Mexico can finally go past the second round when they're not hosting. So I think it's more open. And every World Cup since 2002, the holders have been knocked out in the group stage or have failed to qualify for the following tournament. There you go. There's one for you. So France, the current holders, they don't get out of the group stage. England, Wales in the final is a possibility. Yes, but they're also in the same group, so you know one of them is probably going to finish third in that group and not qualify for the next round. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's England. Italy have failed to qualify for this World Cup. England Nations League was a disaster. France weren't great at the Euros, and the last time they were world champions, they failed to get out of the group. And every champion since then has failed to get out of the group. Failed to get out of the group stage. Spain in 2014 didn't get out of the group. Germany in 2018 didn't get out of the group. France 2002 didn't get out of the group. Italy, I think, failed to get out of their group as well. I don't think they qualified. I can't remember. 2010, but they didn't. They didn't get out the knockout stages. To me, yes, I think it's wide open. I think the time of year it's being played. I think Canada are going to be dark horses in there, but the US could upset things in the England Wales group. Yeah, I can't predict what's going to happen with this one. I really can't. I think it's very, very open and very unpredictable. I think the time of year that the tournament's being played is definitely going to have an impact on the who makes the final. But I wouldn't be surprised if the South American teams go quite far in this one because the time of year the tournament's being played, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's two European and two South American teams make the semi-finals. Of who? Don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if the French don't get out of their group because that appears to be the championship curse. You win the previous tournament, you don't get out of the group in the following, and that's been the case since 2002. And yeah, the last team to win the tournament to then make it out of the group stage was Brazil in '98. They won in '94. I've actually watched the highlights of that and the goals. Yeah, it's suspicious, that Asian Cup. Bit suspicious. Very suspicious. We could have another 2002 career Italy kind of situation on our hands. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Anyway, I've been going now for nearly 4 hours. I'm going to call it a night. I've got some paperwork to do first thing in the morning. I've got to send that paperwork off to the DVLA, the driving license people, because I'm selling my motorbike and I need to do some paperwork that I should have done a year ago, and I'm facing a very big fine if I don't. And so we'll get that done and get that out of the way. What's this? What the hell is that? Oh, that's stuff. So yeah, I've got to do that, and yeah, there'll be some more club history videos tomorrow. I probably might do all the Welsh clubs tomorrow, so I'll space them out throughout the day. I've got a week off work. I've booked some holiday time. At some point this week, my friend Charlie's going to come over with his partner and their dog. Yes, the sausage dog. So there might be one day where we do less content. He's going to be buying the motorbike off. I'm giving him the motorbike to fix. And yeah, we'll see what day he comes over. But the weather this week's looking pretty crap. There's a lot of thunderstorm warnings, heavy rain forecast. We need it. So my week off work, it's pissing down with rain. So the forecast isn't great. So I've got to get, enjoy weather while I can. It's been quite warm today as well. So the change of weather, that's going to be interesting. Could that carry on into October for the Rugby League World Cup? That's something that I don't think people have considered how conditions are going to affect play, for example. But for me, for now, thank you very much for watching. I will have some more content for you very, very soon.